Also, dear listeners, I was reminded that I need to make this disclaimer from a discussion with someone who hadn't seen the entire show yet. We did provide the watch list of episodes to watch to kind of get what we're doing with our domain, but we are going to be discussing the entire show, which is going to include spoilers for the entire show. So if you've started watching through and you want to watch the whole thing and you haven't finished yet, we'll still be here when we're done. We're waiting for you. Enjoy! The Wonderful World of Darklords. Report 35. Castle Wyvern. As the next domain on my itinerary was an island, I once again found myself chartering a boat in order to travel there. I knew from my research that the name Castle Wyvern did not indicate that the domain was a castle and nothing more. An entire city-state had sprung up around the castle in the 1,000 years since it had been abandoned, with its name serving as a reminder of its past. I also knew about the city's most famous feature, its unique architecture, although knowing about it and seeing it are two separate things. When the boat emerged from the mists and I saw Wyvern's skyline, I gasped aloud, and I heard several around me doing the same. Those in the boat who were natives of Wyvern chuckled at us, for apparently the sight of visitors goggling upwards at the enormous buildings has become something of a punchline. I let them chuckle all they wanted, for the sight was astonishing. The buildings climbed up and up and up, some of them so high that their summits were hidden by the clouds. I even caught a glimpse of the castle itself, removed from its original foundations and rebuilt stone by stone upon the tallest building in the city. When I asked one of the native Wyvernians on the boat about the castle, his face grew dark. Apparently it has something of a haunted reputation, for it was the original home of the Gargoyles, not the brutish elemental creatures that I know by that name, but something that, to hear the Wyvernians tell it, was closer to a demon, intelligent and murderous. Although the Gargoyles are regarded as mere legend today, there are those who still watch the skies fearfully at night for any sign of leathery wings, and, as I learned before leaving, they were right to do so.
Welcome to Wonderful World of Darklords. I'm Tom.
I'm Rachel.
And we're discussing how to convert Disney movies to Ravenloft, Domains of Dread, and we're going to force all of you to watch our favorite obscure Disney shows in the process.
We sure are. Along the way, we'll look at the Darklord, the domain itself, and some plot hooks and adaptation ideas to integrate this setting into your own campaign.
Today's episode, Gargoyles.
Stone by day, warriors by night! We live again! Oh, man.
So, happy June, first off. Happy 4th anniversary.
Woo!
This is the beginning of season 4 of our podcast, which began in June 2022 with The Lion King.
Oh, man.
And so we are starting season 4 with another core memory for Disney-affiliated 90s kids.
Yes.
If you went and saw The Lion King in the movie theater, there's a good chance this was your favorite show.
Oh, man. I love this show so much.
Also, speaking of show, we got the Disney cover, got the animated covered, but we are kicking off our small screen summer.
Yes.
Taking the opportunity to explore some of those amazing Disney animated shows that we think would be good Ravenloft domains. And there's many amazing shows.
Yes.
But this is specifically the ones that we think would make a good Ravenloft domain.
Yeah. Like, our kids went on a big Amphibia kick. I don't think that we could really get a domain out of Amphibia.
Or someday I'll figure out something to do with DuckTales. Woohoo. But I don't quite get a Ravenloft domain.
No. Like, we might be able to get a good Mist Wanderer. We'll probably get several good Mist Wanderers.
But even before we came up with this series to justify the shift in format, we were like, we gotta do Gargoyles.
Yes.
And not just because we love it, but because it does make an excellent Ravenloft domain.
Yes. So here, dear listeners, is a blast from the past. Little tween Rachel and her tween brother back in the mid-90s with our red box set, Realm of Terror, the very first homebrew domain that my brother and I ever did. And it was mostly him, so I'm not going to say a whole lot about it, lest he be embarrassed by his 13-year-old self. But it was Demona was the Darklord, because she has such Darklord energy. And I've mentioned a couple times that any of you who were in the Fraternity of Shadows message boards in the early aughts, hi, I was Dominique on there, and it was a reference to Dominique Destine, the Darklord of Wyvernia.
I love you.
I love you too.
This is going to be a slightly different format. That was part of this whole small screen summer. We couldn't just sit down and like use our normal template. It's mostly going to be the same. Couple of shifts we'll kind of talk about as we get there. And it's nice we have that fundamental, whether we're doing a movie, whether we're doing a show, whether we're doing a whatever, that skeleton of a Ravenloft domain.
Yes.
So the format isn't going to be that different because a lot of the Ravenloft domain parts of it are pretty much the same. So let's begin talking about that slightly modified format of this Ravenloft domain and talk about a Darklord of our domain, which Rachel has been ready to do since she was 12.
Yep.
In a section we like to call
The Lord. The Lord. Castle Wyvern answers to a ruling council of nobles, led by the wealthy and ambitious David Xanatos. Born a fisherman, Xanatos was able to parlay a rare coin into a fortune that would make Prince John weep with envy. Many on the council resent answering to an up-jumped peasant, but Xanatos' undeniable brilliance and charm have ensured that his position at the head of the council is secure. For now. I thought at first that Xanatos was the Lord of Wyvern in more ways than one, for my research uncovered countless miraculous strokes of good fortune for Xanatos and ill favor for his rivals that suggested a spider weaving 100 webs of intrigue. However, as I looked into the history of the domain, particularly those legendary gargoyles, another possibility suggested itself. While gargoyles feature in Wyvern's modern art only as fantastical creatures and are derided in all scholarship from the past several centuries, the oldest history and artwork depicts them matter-of-factly, fighting alongside humans as literal beings of flesh and blood, or lifeless stone during the day. Furthermore, unlike the somewhat generic demonic bogeymen of modern art, each gargoyle in the older pieces was unique. Some bearing enormous beaks or Haddesy-like wings, others distinctive scars or remarkable size, suggesting either that artists in older times were more creative, or that they were basing their drawings on historical individuals. The one exception to this diverse iconography was a red-haired female gargoyle who appeared again and again, regardless of time period, fighting against raiders 1,000 years ago, battling alongside King Macbeth a century later, massacring a refugee camp a few centuries after that. She almost seemed an allegorical representation of Wyvern's changing attitudes toward the gargoyle myth, protecting humans in her earliest incarnations and slaughtering them in later ones. Accounts from the reign of King Macbeth lent credence to this theory, for they dubbed her Demona, a name that seems too unsubtle for fact. Whether an avenging angel or merciless devil, two characteristics of Demona remained constant. She was inextricably linked to violence and death, and no allies ever followed her from one era to the next. She traveled through the centuries alone.
So, the Lord, as Rachel's 1990s Ravenloft website username will indicate.
Yes. How could it was message boards instead of just subreddits? Like,
ask your parents, kids. For our younger listeners, ask your parents. Our Darklord is Demona, the best.
The best. Oh my gosh, I love her. I love her so much.
In the Labyrinth episode, I mentioned that sort of core thing that you can overlap Jareth and Strahd, and also made the title of the short that did quite well for us on our YouTube channel. But, like, Byronic garbage fire. Yes. And she's a Byronic garbage fire.
Also, all three of them are total disaster buys. Speaking of subreddits, there was something was about, like, who's a character from a cartoon show who's not bisexual, but they're totally bisexual. And somebody was like, Demona is the most disastrous buy ever to grace the small screen.
So, obvious objection. I see some of you out there in podcast land. You have your finger raised, your other finger hovering above your keyboards, ready to add us. Yes, Xanatos is amazing.
He is.
We'll get to Xanatos. I promise. Yes, we're gonna have an AU. You can lower your finger with Xanatos is the Dark One. That is a branch of reality worth exploring.
See, if we made Xanatos our Darklord, that's what he was expecting us to do.
This whole thing will be an elaborate gambit that'll end with him being Darklord.
Yes.
But he is not as central to the premise and central to the story as Demona is. Like, Xanatos comes in, I think, episode 2 is when we say, I think Awakening episode 1's all medieval Scotland stuff.
Xanatos comes in 1,000 years after the story starts.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Demona is there from the beginning, and Demona is the connective thread of just every part of this story.
The entire show is her fault.
Yes.
I'm sorry. It's the humans' fault.
Yeah.
Always the humans' fault.
Also, Xanatos, one of the things that makes him an amazing character, and if you haven't gone back and watched the show in a bit, you just kind of have those vague 90s kid memories. You should. It holds up really well.
It does.
Beyond delighted to report it holds up quite well.
Yeah, skip the World Tour.
Yeah,
other than that, yeah.
The Xanatos actually does have this really good character arc, and he actually does grow and change over the course of the show, whereas Demona does not.
No.
And indeed, one of the core features of Demona as a character is how static she is.
It's the Darklord double down, triple down, quadruple down. She has got more downs than a football game.
1,000 years of downs, yeah. Just, Demona is this incredibly static character who is given countless opportunities for self-reflection and change. And screams at every one of those and runs away. And that is an amazing Darklord bit. Chassis.
Yes.
That's right there. The fact, here's this character who keeps being offered opportunities for self-reflection and growth and just doubles down and makes everything worse for herself. That just screams Darklord.
Yes.
So if you have clicked on this, if you are listening to this, you probably a 90s kid or possibly have 90s kid parents, as our own children do.
You're just so excited somebody's talking about gargoyles, maybe.
Gargoyles. Yeah. You know what the gargoyles are, and we mean in this specific context, not just the abstract idea of church monster decorations. If you clicked on it for just that, then there's a really great show you're going to watch on Disney Plus soon, I hope.
Yes. And if you're listening to this because you just love Ravenloft and or the podcast, thank you. We appreciate you listening to a podcast about a show that you haven't watched.
That's the ultimate compliment.
Yes. We do have a watch list of the just basic necessary episodes to get what's going on with the show. For where our status quo is, it's 12 episodes. It'll be all right.
It's on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
But you hopefully clicked on this knowing what Gargoyles is, or have paused and gone and done our watch list and now know what Gargoyles is, but you might not know what a Darklord is. Maybe as you're just happy we're talking about Gargoyles. And you're let's see where this Ravenloft thing's going to take us. So, Rachel, for those people out there, what is a Darklord?
Well, a Darklord is an evil being, possibly a Byronic garbage runner, who commits some kind of act of ultimate darkness that causes the dark powers to say, why, hello, new friend, we want to play with you forever. And so they pluck that evil being up, and they place them in a domain, which is a special hell tailor-made just for them. There are some really great Darklords, there are some not-so-great Darklords, so we are going to talk about the 4 qualities that separate the Strahd von Zaroviches from the, Uruk von Karkov. I'm going to pick on you because you're one of the reasons we didn't pick Xanatos. The Strahd von Zaroviches from the Uruk von Karkovs. The first element is that act of ultimate darkness. They do a specific, irredeemably evil thing. In Strahd's case, it was killing his brother because he wanted to get with his brother's fiancée. Uruk von Karkov, one of the Darklords we always pick on, did not have one of these. Neither does Xanatos. That's another reason why we didn't go with him. Our second element is what they call in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft the Torment, because we're a Disney podcast, we call it they got what they wanted, they lost what they had. In Strahd's case, it's congratulations, your brother's out of the way, you have eternal youth, so you're not too old for Titania, but you're too Strahd for Titania, and you always will be. Our third element is an element of tragedy or relatability. They're not just evil for the sake of being evil. There's something about them that makes us wince in sympathy. And in Strahd's case, it's that unrequited love is just the worst. And then the fourth element is the domain reflects the Darklord and their curse in some way. Strahd is the Darklord of spooky gothic vampire land. He is not the Darklord of Manhattan. And Barovia, his domain, is a boring mud slump because it reflects that curse of loneliness. Not only can he not be with Titania, but he can't be around anyone else who's an intellectual equal to him either.
So, Demona, we are going to argue, we are going to posit, has all 4 of these qualities, and you're listening, you either already knew that, or found out in between the last couple minutes of the episode, pausing and watching Gargoyles. You're welcome, by the way.
Gargoyles people, you're hearing those qualities, you're nodding along.
Yeah, no.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Demona, yeah.
The access code is alone.
So, that will be coming up again. So, our Act of Ultimate Darkness is very simple, and this is, as Rachel kind of mentioned, one of the big arguments for Demona ahead of Xanatos, which is there is a specific origin story point of Ultimate Darkness.
Yeah, and I think, like, even it makes sense they didn't want to give one of those to Xanatos. They wanted to give him a redemption arc. And if you do an act of Ultimate Darkness, you've just completely lost the audience's sympathy.
It's Ultimate Darkness.
It's Ultimate, yes.
So, we're taking right from Awakenings, her act of Ultimate Darkness is betraying her clan to the Raiders. And we're going to go into this in more detail later. One change we're making is we're kind of merging those settings of that opening in medieval Scotland with Castle Wyvern and then Manhattan. So we were imagining basically that Castle Wyvern was on this island. And then over the course of that 1,000 years, it became a city.
Yeah.
They aren't taken across the Atlantic Ocean. They awaken in the same place they asleep in. It's
kind of the equivalent of if Edinburgh had gotten built up around Castle Wyvern. Only, you know, Edinburgh is Manhattan side. And you could see that happening in 1,000 years. Just like this huge city gets built up around this former castle. And we're doing that mostly because there's a Dark Lord, Demona is stuck in this one location. But also to just simplify it because, ye gods, Gargoyles has a Byzantine plot.
Yes. So, we're imagining that you had this kind of very hostile mountainous region. There were lots of monsters. There were lots of raiders and bandits.
Superstition and the Sword ruled.
Superstition and the Sword ruled. And then you had the colony of gargoyles that lived in kind of the cliffs on this island, and they protected people. So people came to come understand this island as a safe place and build Castle Wyvern. And it became this big refuge and kind of center of safety, mainly because they did have the gargoyles still protecting them. And then Demona, like, they got that there was some resentment there was some hostility, there was some fear. Demona grew increasingly resentful and betrayed the castle, and unwillingly, but like kind of knowingly betrayed. She knew they were there when she left.
Oh my gosh. Any sympathy I have for Demona leaves when I rewatch Awakening Part 1, and she's all like, take me at least, Goliath, so I don't get killed.
I can help you. So she chose to, I'm not going to go into a ton of the detail of the backstory, because I feel like you've seen it. If you already saw it or listened to us, you already know this backstory, but she betrayed Castle Wyvern to these raiders, and almost all her clan was smashed. And when she awoke and saw this, the mist rose up and brought the island into Ravenloft.
The raiders, they promised they wouldn't smash her clan. She didn't trust them, so she hid. But, you know, she didn't not trust them enough to tell the rest of the clan that this might happen. So, way to go, Demona.
Ultimate, I would classify that as ultimate darkness. So then we have our torment. She got what she wanted, she lost what she had. Got what she wanted, the humans are gone from the castle, the gargoyles and the humans are totally disentangled. The gargoyles are not fighting for humans anymore. They're totally separate. No one expects them to fight for humans. She's become effectively immortal, so she kind of has this infinite time to dream of gargoyle supremacy. So that's her getting what she wants. But password is alone.
It sure is.
Because of that kind of core act of distrust and betrayal, she will always be marked by betrayal. And she will always be defined by that lack of trust.
A line you're going to be hearing again later is, I've stayed alive this long because I don't trust anyone.
Yes.
And she believes everyone will eventually betray her, and she has to betray them first.
Yes.
And because, you know, again, all of her has been marked by this act of betraying others and being betrayed by others. And so now that's just the lens through which she sees the world, and she cannot get out of that lens.
Yes. So we have the specific example in the show history of Macbeth. The idea is that, like, that's a pattern she's been repeating for 1,000 years. That she might ally with someone, but she will eventually get paranoid. She will eventually betray them. And her actions, kind of in the name of gargoyle supremacy, have driven gargoyles to near extinction. Which is just such a perfect kind of Ravenloft Darklord torment of, she's theoretically doing all this in the sort of the name of her people, and she's destroyed most of her people.
When we were watching Gargoyles with our kids, I don't remember how old our oldest was at that point. I think it was a tween. And we got to all the Macbeth stuff, and he was, like, baffled by why she would be dumb enough to turn on Macbeth. We were kind of, like, explaining this is why she did it. And he kept paused for a minute and went, yeah, Demona's gonna Demona.
And that is a better and more succinct and more clear description of her torment than anything I've said or will say. Demona is gonna Demona. And we're even imagining, kind of bringing in a little bit of World Tour stuff, that every couple of, maybe century or two, new gargoyles will pop up somehow. Like some gargoyles she will connect with. They will find her. They'll hear stories about Castle Wyvern, gargoyles there. They'll come to Castle Wyvern, and she'll end up getting them killed.
Always.
Like, kind of like, once again, like the kind of the Macbeth story. She'll get a little clan, but she'll end up getting them killed.
Yeah. And in this version of events, kind of like the Manhattan clan, she's either going to get them killed or they're going to end up leaving and going to another domain, and then she'll be, cut off from gargoyles. It's this constant pattern. She's going to be locked in forever.
So, then we have the element of tragedy and relatability, despite our well-spoken disdain for Demona being demoning. That's part of what makes her a great character, is she is so sort of loathsome and terrible, but who among us has not doubled down on a bad decision?
And blamed other people for our mistakes because it's so much easier than looking in the mirror.
Goodness.
Like, that is Demona's number one mode, is she knows she's the author of all her own misfortunes. And if she ever admits that, it'll destroy her. Yes. So she has to blame the humans for everything.
I'm not angry at myself, I'm angry at them.
Yes. And just, oh man, that hashtag relatable.
Yeah. Just to say, I've made terrible decisions. I'm going to lash out and blame other people so I don't have to look in the mirror. And then just continually doubling down. We're also going to hear this again. The what have they done? Yes. Is like Demona's gonna Demona, that is a more perfect, succinct explanation of what I'm trying to communicate here than anything I said.
There are many reasons so many tweens loved this show in the 90s. And one of them is this was such a mind-blowingly complex character when you're approaching her as a tween, and even just, she's such a relatable character when you're approaching her as a tween, because you're just coming up on adolescence and you've got this stew of rage and self-loathing.
Right, yes,
and Demona is like, are you me?
Demona is kind of, now that you phrase it like that, kind of just a very old, angry 15-year-old. Yeah. And who amongst us has not been an angry 15-year-old?
She and Jareth and Peter Pan could just hang out and be perpetual
deeply
children together.
Relatable. Deeply, deeply tragic, deeply, deeply relatable. The password is alone is a gut punch that has not lost any of its power in the intervening decades.
She and Jareth even have the same hair.
Yeah, right? You give hair care tips. How to get your mullet really spiky. Then, finally, we have the domain reflecting the Darklord. And here's the first of our changes from our usual format, because we are going to start this section talking about where in the show are we? What is the status quo of the show? So, we are imagining the Manhattan clan has been freed from their curse. That's sort of for some torment of the dark powers.
Dark powers were like, let's throw her ex-husband at her. That'll be fun.
This is going to be so good.
Things have been boring for a while.
They have split. This is not Awakenings like part 3 or 4 where they think Demona's our buddy. Demona's my wingman. And they've teamed up with Elisa, and they're trying to oppose Demona, and they're trying to oppose Xanatos. There are rumors about them. There are stories about gargoyles in the city, and people are scared of them. The average, rational person in the daytime would say, this is silly, there's no such things as gargoyles, they're extinct. We'll get into this more later with the backstory.
Yeah, I know, if any of you are raising your fingers being like, I'm planning on sending a dragonborn and aarakocra here, we'll get there. We'll get there. So, gargoyles are extinct. That's so silly. It's just superstition. It's just rumors. It's just ghost stories. But, if they're out at night and they see winged shadow flying overhead, they speed up. That kind of fear is growing, and you have people in the city taking advantage of that fear. And so we are having it be that she has that Puck curse/gift to turn human during the day. Yeah, we're setting this between the Mirror and City of Stone.
Which were both on our watch list.
Yes. Because if you missed the watch list, or didn't get that far on the watch list, the Mirror, at the end, she gets a gift from Puck. She says she doesn't want to be stoned during the day anymore because she's too vulnerable. And Puck being Puck is like, okay, cool, I'll turn you into a human.
I know, this is going to be This is going to be so much fun. I know exactly how to fix that problem.
Yes. And we're doing that because it opens up a lot more plot possibilities. If she's able to turn human during the day, she's able to do things during the day, be active. You can have, like, the NPC who turns out to be Demona. It's very useful from a gaming perspective to have her able to do this. And then City of Stone, again, if you didn't get to that one on our list, is when she and Xanatos, they have an alliance up until that point. That's when they break it off.
Yeah.
And her and Xanatos having this tenuous alliance is a really great status quo for your PCs to come in on, because that's a thing they can change. If they break those two kids up,
right,
then that's a way that they can kind of change the status quo for the better. So that's a very fruitful time to set it.
So that is where we are in the setting, but how does the domain, this setting, reflect the Dark Lord? The kind of idea of this fear, this mistrust, this betrayal. That's kind of one of the hallmarks of Gargoyles villains. It's going to be one of the hallmarks of sort of the villains of this setting, is this lack of trust. And that's going to be the thing. There's kind of a psychic energy of, like, mistrust and ambition. And this is just sort of in the atmosphere that gets people to turn on each other.
It's like Demona's original sin is treachery. Xanatos betrays them. The pack betrays them. Like, there's just treachery coming out of everywhere.
Yeah. And a big thing that one of the reasons the Gargoyles are able to win a lot of times and beat these villains is trust.
Yes.
First off, they trust each other. And second off, they are willing to trust other people. So, like, classic example, Elisa. The Gargoyle is willing to reach out with the open hand and make that connection with her and make her part of their clan, make her an ally. And you have that later with Lisa and Bluestone. Being like, you know what, Lisa, like, you know, the Gargoyle will say this, like if you vouch for him, if you trust him, we trust him too.
Yeah.
And that being kind of the secret weapon of the heroes of this show is trust.
Yeah.
So for the stat block for our Dark Lord Demona, we have the basic stat block to build off of, which is Demona has stats similar to a gargoyle.
What?
That's what's so helpful. We have that specific thing. And of course, the 5e Monster Manual Gargoyle is not the exact analog to the Disney in the Afternoon animated series Gargoyle, but that is the genius of stats similar to it.
Yes, and what
the magic
legally
works.
distinct from.
In terms of powers, special powers and abilities of Domain Lord, for various machinations of her life, she's become effectively immortal. As an immortal, she has pretty extensive resources. She has access to money. In the mirror, she has this whole gargoyle-themed mansion, and she hires goons, and really has access to money, to resources.
Even before she could turn human during the day, so, like, yeah, now she can. So if you want to bring in some of that stuff from the later on the show when she had her own company, then yeah.
Also, she is an occult student. She is the most arcane capable of any of the gargoyles in the show. And so we're imagining she does have wizard levels in that long eternity of centuries. I studied magic pretty extensively. And that's one of the reasons we have the alliance with Xanatos. That's kind of what she brings to the table. Is she is kind of his main resources for magic and the occult. And speaking of, as Rachel mentioned, we are imagining at this point, she does have the curse/blessing where she turns human by day, because that's more interesting. That gives the PCs a chance to encounter her during the day. That lets it be she's like doing stuff in the day that they have to counter, because the Gargoyles can't, the Manhattan Clan can't. And then we are imagining, speaking of running a company, she has a company. She has a merchant house she runs, Nightstone Enterprises, Industries, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I remember what the second word was.
Similarly, that just gives you a bunch of points where the PCs can be interacting with her. And a bunch of ways for the PCs to kind of get on her radar.
Yeah.
And Merchant House, one of the reasons it's doing very well, it's thriving, is because of its alliance with Xanatos. He is currently the most powerful figure in the city. He's kind of the first lord of the city. And so he's giving her access to all these financial and political resources. And as we said, she's giving him access to occult and arcane resources. And so for the moment, for the status quo of the domain, they're both useful to each other.
Yep, everything's coming along just fine for now.
For now. We're right about teetering on the precipice of she decides she can't trust him and has to strike first.
As she does.
As she does. And then closing the borders, the power all Darklords have. Okay, there's a horrible lady gargoyle that wants to murder us. Why don't we just leave this island and go someplace else?
This one, actually, when we were planning, you thought that this was my idea. This is actually my brother's idea.
Okay.
I'm stealing this from our domain that we made when we were
Yes,
spoilers.
I was hoping some middle school. Let's put on that alternative rock. We're going back to the 90s, folks.
Let's blast some Goo Goo Dolls. So, closing the borders. It's on an island. So you're going to row out in your little boat, possibly to Avalon.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't, but you do what you want.
And then you start noticing that your body's getting a little stiff and hard to move. You look down and your hand looks kind of gray. And you realize you are slowly turning to stone. And if you don't turn this boat around, you are going to be a statue floating in your boat. And Demona's are going to come out and smash you. Because that's what she can do when they're humanoids who are statues for her to smash.
That is so good. I love that. I love that as a theme domain here. The mist. You even have that kind of imagery from the show we can use of the kind of sailing into the mist to go to the Avalon Wool Tour. But this, you sail into the mist. You don't go to, like, Ireland or whatever you go to. You are a statue now. Good job.
Yeah.
And once again, there is the flesh to stone spell. So easy, like, stats for you to pull. If you're doing this, if you're using this, you can just look up that spell and use that.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the Dark Lord write-up in terms of stat block, in terms of powers. But then in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, we always have the role-playing trait Ideal, Bond, and Flaw. And in Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, they always like to use quotes, but they can make up their own quotes, but that's not how we roll. So this is another area where we are shifting a little bit from the normal format of doing these from movies.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you realize this, dear listener, but movies are much, 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 much shorter than shows.
They are?
Yes. And so with a movie, we can go through all the quotes on the IMDb page, or in case of deep emergency like Callahan, I can just go through, or Sean Yu, I can go through like the screenplay online and just do a like Control F Sean Yu and look for every piece of dialogue he has. I believe it was 15 lines of dialogue.
Still better than Callahan.
Yes, which was like 8. Yes. And most of them were, "This ends now!" And so normally we collect lines of dialogue, and it might be we each pick a couple, or it might be that, you know, one of us who has more free time that month picks some in advance, and we talk it over. And hopefully, if you are a returning dear listener, that has been interesting to hear us kind of talk through the quotes. But that is not possible here in a show, because Demona has
so many quotes.
Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of dialogue over the course of like 63 episodes, many of which have her in them.
Yes.
So many lines.
And even, like, it was a thing that came up, actually, in our last episode, in the Xanatos episode, that Tom found a really great trait and a really great ideal for Thanos, but they were hitting the same beat. And since we have such an embarrassment of riches when it comes to quotes for characters and shows, we wanted to make sure that we were kind of hitting different beats with all of these quotes. So we're kind of encapsulating all of these parts of Demona's character.
Yes. So what we decided to do for our small screen summer and any other future shows we might decide to adapt, we're just going to give you the quotes as a fait accompli. We just looked, we figured it out, we got the quotes. We can talk a little bit about why we picked them, because hopefully somebody finds that interesting. Otherwise, I'm sorry, our podcast dips in the middle.
If you prefer us presenting it as a fait accompli, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, thank goodness, there's not like a 10-minute chunk where they're talking about quotes, let us know. We figure if you're listening to the episode, you love the character and you want to hear us talking about other quotes. But if you're like, why are these episodes so long? There's a way that you could make them 10 minutes shorter. Let us know.
So, the role-playing trait was the hardest one to do. So, it's first in the write-up, but we'll do that last, I think.
Yes.
The ideal, the bond, and the flaw, we were able to do basically off the IMDb quotes page.
The ideal, I remember, I love this line. I thought for sure this was going to be her ideal. In the episode Temptation, which is, it looks like at the end of the Awakening, it looks like she died. And then Temptation is the episode where she first comes back, and Goliath goes, "Demona, so you did survive." And she says, "I always survive." And that seemed like such a great ideal.
Yes.
But then I remembered the quote that she has in that last episode of Awakening, which takes it one step further.
Yes.
"I've stayed alive this long because I don't trust anyone."
Yes. That nailed it. That's everything we want to say about this girl.
Not only is it that she always survives, but it's specifically that she survives because she doesn't trust anyone.
And that loops into the whole torment of she always survives, she's always alone.
Yes.
I think she always survives because she doesn't trust anyone. So she does always, land on top. She does always, get while the getting's good, but she's always alone.
Yes.
As I said, we're returning to this. The password is alone.
The password is alone. Oh,
so,
funny.
Then we have the bond. And for, I don't remember what episode is this.
This was Awakening. Yeah, this was when Goliath is first finding out that she has gone cuckoo bananas in the past 1,000 years. She's giving her big rant about how she's going to kill all humans.
They have to pay. All humanity has to pay for what they did to our kind.
Her bond is to her hatred.
Yes, her bond, her hatred, her vengeance, and even that whole line has to pay for what they did to our kind. We get some of the sublimated guilt.
Yes, that's what she did.
That's what she did. Yes, they have to pay. All humanity has to pay. And even just this sort of madness of she's punishing people for things that other humans did 1,000 years ago.
And that she also did.
Yes.
And that there are, as far as she knows, only 6 other gargoyles left in the world, and she's willing to kill them in the name of vengeance for what humanity did to the other gargoyles. Just what the actual butts, Demona? What the actual butts?
The flaw, I think we might have known this going in.
I think
we were in the initial talk through, even before we were sitting down doing the script, just kind of talking through the episode, I think we were like, the flaw has to be...
It's when she's seen Goliath, who's been turned to stone at night. She hugs him in tears and says, what have they done to you?
And then that, get echoes in Hunter's Moon. It's
deepest thing in the world when you're 12.
So powerful, yeah. And just, that's Demona in a nutshell. What have they done?
Lord forbid you look in a mirror.
And that's the genius, and that's the beauty, and that's the deliciousness, is she does have that moment of self-reflection. She does have...
It's close!
Yes, but then turns away from it. Then jumps to her safety blanket of genocidal hatred.
Yes.
Against humanity. So perfect, so succinct summation of this character's flaw, and this character's tragedy, and this character's misery and torment. What have they done?
Yeah.
So then we had the role-playing trait, and this is the one where, we could not get it from that initial read-through of kind of the most famous Demona quotes.
We were trying with her trait. She's very manipulative.
Yeah.
She has a horrible temper. If we could have her trait be an action, it would absolutely be that time when she's fighting Hudson and she uses her laser bazooka as a club.
Yes.
Because she's too angry to remember to shoot him with it.
And a lot of her core qualities we have already hit. As we mentioned, we're really trying to, make sure we do the full rounded picture of Demona here. So we kind of got the, horrible sublimating her guilt into hatred, how the most important thing in her life is her hatred, the paranoia and the betrayal. We got that with I've stayed alive because I don't trust anyone. We really wanted to hit, as Rachel said, the manipulativeness.
Yeah.
Especially because role-playing trait, that's she's probably going to come at them first, trying to manipulate them. But then also if we could slide into temper.
Yeah.
We have a little bit of that with these other quotes, but really hitting it a little harder.
Yeah, so we thought about one of the ones from Temptation, that episode where she tricks Brooklyn into joining him for a little bit. We looked really hard at some of those.
Yeah.
But they weren't quite spiky enough. So we went with, from Awakening Part 1, before she's betrayed the humans, so she's ranting at Goliath. Have you no pride? No sense of justice? We saved them, and they repay us with contempt. These cliffs were our home ages before they built their stone fortress. They should bow to us.
And this is just it's great as a role-playing trait, 'cause our big guideline with the role-playing trait is always the sort of what's going to help the DM with the scene where the PCs are interacting with this Dark Lord. And I feel this is perfect because you get the anger, the wounded sense of justice. You even get the PCs being oh, wow, she has a point. That is really... And then kind of ending with the they should bow to us. Whoa. Okay, wow. I was kind of with you for a good part of this. It isn't... it isn't fair that they're being so mean to you. But they should bow to us.
They should bow to us.
Okay. That's kind of manipulative. But that manipulativeness, it's less effective because of her temper.
Yes, her temper gets in the way.
It always gets in the way. That's the thing with the her manipulating Brooklyn. There were some good quotes, but also they were too smooth.
Yes.
Because this is her coming on full charm and this is a gargoyle. This is someone she likes and respects as much as she likes and respects anyone. As opposed to, like, the PCs where she might try to manipulate them, but she's going to have that baseline contempt.
Yeah. It's actually an important thing to bring up, I think, here. We're talking about, like, her temper getting in the way and everything. We were rewatching The Mirror, looking for quotes from that one, and she had her whole plan for sealing the mirror, and it was a really smart plan.
Yeah.
And we were talking about that, and it's important to remember with Demona, her int is off the charts.
Yes,
like, she is
very smart.
Other than Lexington, she is the smartest gargoyle on the show. So she can make these plans.
Right.
She can make amazing plans. But when she's actually executing them, that's when her low wisdom score might get in the way and cause her temper to foul her up.
Yes. Like I have a laser bazooka I'm going to use as a club.
Yes.
Because I'm just so dang mad. Or she's going to let, like, in the same episode, which is so amazing.
So good. The Mirror
Long Way
so
to
good.
Morning. I was thinking Long Way to Morning.
A Long Way to Morning. I
and
know
just
how to wait.
that, like, she lets herself get baited by Hudson.
Yes.
Like, int score, she's much higher than Hudson. Whiz score, not a contest.
No.
And he's absolutely able to sort of, like, wisdom rings around her and bait her and manipulate her into going after him, into stalking him, into, like, using all this time.
Yes. So, yeah, that is our discussion of my girlfriend, Demona. And now let's...
Your live journal icon.
She was my live journal icon.
GIF, Demona.
Haylight made that for me, by the way. Haylight making art for me goes back way beyond our logo.
Journal.
Yeah, I didn't have Photoshop and Haylight did. So they made me like a Demona holding the laser bazooka going, I have a name too, Goliath. And that was my angry live journal icon, because they had the different live journal icons for all their moods.
For 5 emotions. For our younger listeners, ask your parents.
Yes. So there's my live journal icon girlfriend, Demona. Now, let's talk about the heck of a time we had
This was the
making Manhattan into a Ravenloft domain in a section we like to call
The Land.
The Land. According to those older, now discredited accounts, which I am more inclined to believe than the modern ones for reasons that will soon become clear, the island housing Castle Wyvern originally belonged to the Gargoyles alone. Before any humanoids settled there, gargoyles made their homes in its cliffs and caves. When the first humans arrived, fleeing violence on the mainland, the gargoyles agreed to welcome them. Eventually, the humans built Castle Wyvern and declared it a refuge for all of those who sought to escape war and persecution. A situation that reminded me of Encanto or Rosas, except that in this case, their utopian ideals actually prevailed for a time. The gargoyles defended the castle from any intruders who might follow the refugees, and the humans were grateful for their protection. Of course, this idyllic situation could only last so long before fear, jealousy, and resentment appeared. As more and more refugees came, the gargoyles balked at sharing their home with a population that now outnumbered them 10 to 1, many of whom could not pull their own weight in battle. Several of the humans, meanwhile, were newly arrived to the island and frightened of the gargoyles' massive size and monstrous appearance, stoking further enmity. Matters came to a head when the castle was besieged by raiders, leading to arguments over how the dwindling resources should be distributed, with several humans voicing their fears that the gargoyles would eat them. Eventually, some of those in the castle decided that the enemies without were preferable to those within, and opened the gates to the raiders during the day while the gargoyles were stone. The castle was ransacked and the gargoyles smashed in their stone sleep. Eventually, humans returned to resettle Castle Wyvern, but the gargoyles were all but extinct, resurfacing briefly and rarely in the histories, only to vanish again. Over the past 1,000 years, a continuous influx of immigrants has transformed Wyvern into a massive, thriving metropolis, but because the island is so small, it can only grow upwards, not outwards, leading to those magnificent buildings that seem to touch the sky itself. In recent years, David Xanatos went so far as to have the original castle moved to the top of his towering estate, as I saw on my arrival. While the specific betrayals of the past are long forgotten, after all, with the exception of the paranoid or superstitious, no one will admit to believing in gargoyles during the day, treachery remains widespread in Wyvern. Xanatos is hardly the only member of the ruling council to have off-the-table alliances with foreign powers or criminal elements, and there are few members of the City Watch who are not on the payroll of one notable family or another. Other than the absence of food tasters, it reminded me in many ways of Borca. save that Xanatos, with his lack of noble blood or aristocratic family ties, is in a far more precarious position than any Baritsi or Delisnia, which doubtless gives his scheming a layer of particular urgency.
So, the land here is probably going to be the biggest shift, the biggest change from the way we've done it so far with movies. So, that difference comes from the fact this is a show. There are a lot of potential places, a lot of potential locations. Like Curse of Strahd, if you made a movie of that, it would pretty much just be the original Castle Ravenloft adventure. It would be like the village of Barovia, Madame Ava's encampment, and Castle Ravenloft. That would be the whole setting for a movie based on Curse of Strahd, pretty much. Maybe like one other place that you go to, but that's focused. Whereas if it's like a TV show based on Curse of Strahd, that would be everything in Curse of Strahd and everything in Barovia. That's the full thing.
Speaking of, by the way, when we've talked about whether or not a domain has more like one adventure, Sienna, WandaVision potential, or full-length domain, Barovia, Pirates of the Caribbean potential. We usually use the metaphor of it being like a movie versus a show. We're not even going to bother doing that section in these episodes because the answer for all of them is that you can set an entire campaign here.
That is indeed the show.
Yeah, the show's
is that. It is multiple years, level 1 to 11 of Gargoyles, the campaign.
Yeah. So we're going to be skipping that section entirely.
So we have got pages and pages and pages potentially to do every significant, like, location in the show Gargoyles. Even if we limited it to, like, location that plays a significant role in 3 episodes or more, that's still 63 episodes to pull locations from.
Well, we have to take out the world tour.
Yes.
Because that would only be one episode for each. But stupid world tour, I hate it.
So this is our big shift here. Rather than going through sort of being location-based, we're going to touch a couple of important locations. But for the setting of a TV show, I think much more significant is going to be factions and NPCs.
Yeah, like the thing you're interested in a Gargoyles episode, like, I assume, dear listeners, you are much less interested in hearing about Pack Media Studios. You are hearing about the Pack.
Yes, and even the point of a lot of these significant locations is their strong association with a particular NPC or faction or something like that. So that's our big difference here. We're still going to go through the noteworthy features, but we're going to be categorizing them more by people than by places. And that's the plan going forward with other shows for our small screen side.
Yeah.
So, but first, the basic setting. As we mentioned before, for a whole bunch of reasons, we are merging Manhattan and Castle Wyvern. We're merging Awakenings Part 1 and 2, and Awakenings Part 2 through the end of the series.
Yeah.
Even just on a pure Darklord level, we have this clear active ultimate darkness, and that means Demona's trapped there, and that means, like, that has to be the domain.
Yeah, just mechanically speaking.
Yes.
Like,
but even just for simplicity's sake. So as we mentioned, we're imagining this is a very hostile time, Castle Wyvern.
A time of darkness?
An age of fear. That Castle Wyvern on this island is this sort of refuge. It has gargoyle protectors that nested in the cliffs around where the castle's built. And so it becomes this refuge. The island becomes this refuge of people seeking more peace and stability. And eventually it grows up into a city. Like, it goes from an island with a big castle and a bunch of, like, villages on the island kind of centered around the castle to Manhattan. And this was a safer place because of the Gargoyles. But for what happened with Demona, after Demona's actions for Gargoyle supremacy...
Way to go, Demona.
The Gargoyles became kind of a memory, a legend. Like, they would tell stories about how in the old days there was Gargoyles. In the old days, Gargoyles protected the people of Castle Wyvern. And for most people in sort of quote-unquote the present, that's a fairy story. That's an old ghost story from the past.
And it's actually because we wanted to have that sense that they're afraid of gargoyles.
Yes.
That we wanted to give Demona, like, a little bit of a valid point, and we'll talk about this in challenges, but we wanted there to be a reason why gargoyles are hiding when you've got, like, aarakocra and dragonborn running around. Yeah. So, over time, it's mutated from this story about gargoyles protecting people to this story about gargoyles as the boogeyman.
Right.
Like, mothers tell their children, if you're naughty, the gargoyles will come and take you. So, there's this whole, that gargoyles are, like, this fairy tale monster that, like, even in a fantasy world,
Right.
still has teeth that you would not expect a magical creature to have in a fairy tale world.
It's always that tricky thing of a lot of these pieces of fiction we're adapting are grounded more in the real world, where sort of the idea of a quote-unquote monster is scary, and that scariness is a big part of the story. But if, like, you live in Dungeons and Dragons land, you're like, yeah, sure, monsters, whatever. Like, there was 1d6, you know, roll, wyverns when I was out in the forest the other day. It's also, I think, important that, you know, it's on the island. That limits the expansion, so the city grows vertically. Because I think that's a critical element in Gargoyles, is it has to be in Manhattan. It has to be the towers of glass and steel.
Oh, so cool. So cool.
It's like the whole, I've heard people say the whole Spider-Man really only works in Manhattan. Only works in New York, and especially Manhattan. And the Gargoyles, it doesn't have the same punch without the towers of glass and steel. For them to perch on and glide down, and just the, like, canyons of metal for the Gargoyles to fly in.
I don't think we have a Tom's Eberron minute in this one, just because there's not enough specific Eberron content. But if you're thinking about, you know, what is it, the City of Spiders? Sharn. Yeah. If you're thinking about Sharn, yes, that's what we're going for here.
And that would not be a terrible, like, map to steal for this version of Manhattan. We're still calling the city Castle Wyvern, just it's named after that. So the city's called Castle Wyvern, but Castle Wyvern refers to the whole city on the whole island. And speaking of, we've mentioned this before, it's wonderful to have a real world source, because you can always reference that for maps or for questions about the setting. You can just look at a map of Manhattan. You can be like, there's a big park in the middle. That's like supposed to be like woodlands for people to use. But that's where your druids will be. You've got, you know, Fifth Avenue. Like, this chunk of the city is where the rich and the nobles live. This chunk of the city is like more, you know, these packed apartment blocks for poorer, lower class commoners.
This is the entertainment district where the bards are performing.
Yeah, exactly. And so I love taking a real city, because if they're ever like, where's the nearest, you know, armory, you can just pull up map of Manhattan and look for where there is like a retail district. So our noteworthy features. As we said, we're going by NPCs, by factions. We're going to start with the city council, the ruling council. City council is more accurate, but also sounds very silly.
It does sound very silly and tiny. Like
the ruling council, or the council.
City council sounds like they're like a smaller thing within a larger government, and like it's a city-state. The city council is also the state council, so.
We will have a comprehensive write-up of the full number of members, all Gargoyles cameos and references.
They are.
We're going to have that couple, Margot and what's-her-face.
Brendan.
Yeah, Margot and Brendan are going to be in it. But the ones worth mentioning on Mike, the most significant, of course, the man, the myth, the bearded legend, the smirky bearded legend.
The evil Riker.
David Xanatos himself. He is the first lord. He is the kind of president of the council. He's the most important
him like
figure.
The president of Manhattan.
He's kind of the mayor, but he's not unlimited in power. Like, there is a council, and he always does have to deal with the politicking back and forth.
Like more like the prime minister?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And we are, you know, taking his really cool backstory from the show. He's very Nouveau Riche. Emphasis on the Nouveau and emphasis on the Riche.
Yes.
He is.
Both of these are
he
equally.
He was born a commoner. His father was a fisherman who would fish off the docks. You know, the East Side docks. Mysterious things happened, possibly with secret societies. And now he is just the most colossally wealthy person in the entire domain.
Oh, this up-jumped peasant.
Yeah, right? Like, he was born in a shack. And his big rival is, of course, the sort of blue-blooded, wealthy noble Renard, who hates him. And David Xanatos,
he stole his daughter.
as possibly just as revenge to start with, stole his daughter and married her.
Did blossom into genuine love, but...
And that's the thing. Like, if he's just like the prince, he has a stability that he doesn't have in the show. Like, it's important that Xanatos is always kind of facing enemies, facing rivals, facing opposition from all sides.
Especially because, like, Xanatos doesn't really have political power in the show. And so we're giving him political power here as kind of like a way to simplify things.
Yes.
Because, you know, your PCs are going to come in and they're going to want to know, well, who's in charge? And It's Gargoyles. Xanatos is
in charge.
So that's why we're giving him this political power that he didn't have in the show. But we don't want it to be absolute. I think this ruling council would think it's your idea, and it was a great idea.
Yeah, he's constantly sort of having to deal with the politicking of these other nobles, and that's even part of why the alliance with Demona. That's why he wants to pursue these occult resources. He'd go to all the trouble of doing all this curse-breaking stuff to get the Gargoyles on his side, because he is kind of constantly dealing with this viper's nest, where if he, makes a mistake, if he makes a misstep, if he stumbles, he has these political rivals who will come for him.
Yes.
And then we have, speaking political rivals who will come for him, we have the Dracons.
Yeah!
Who ostensibly are just legitimate businessmen, legitimate merchants who run, the docks, run shipping, but they are actually the underworld.
Yes. And
they control the underworld, and there are a few people in the City Watch who have kind of twigged to this and are trying to expose them.
I don't speak Saltmarsh, so we're going to have to defer to you for this, but isn't there somebody in the City Council in Saltmarsh who, they're a big smuggling guy?
Yeah, Gellin Primewater, yeah.
Yeah, so that might be a good place to take some adventure hooks from.
And that could be a thing that the PCs, we've mentioned this before, if you've listened to other episodes, we always love to find those opportunities for the PCs to change the status quo and make things better. They can't overthrow, kill Demona, Ravenloft Darklord plot armor, but they could, overthrow the Dracons.
Yes.
They could, end their reign of criminal terror on the city.
Yes.
By helping Elisa and some of her loyal companions reveal their criminal truth to the city council.
Demona gives no fluff about the Dracons.
Yes.
It does not impact her torment at all if the Dracons come.
Neither do the Dark Powers.
Neither do the Dark Powers, exactly.
Where we could have Macbeth in here. I love this as an NPC to throw into any setting, the wild card.
I love Macbeth so much.
He has his own agenda. It's, once again, no fluffs given about any of this, city stuff. He has his own agenda. He'll fight the PCs. He'll help the PCs. He'll save the PCs. He'll do whatever to pursue his own agenda, and that's just throwing a hand grenade into the setting.
Yes, and speaking of Macbeth, if you're but Macbeth was a different thing, and she was in a different area, since we're talking about 1,000-year time span, you can absolutely still have it be, and then Macbeth was the next king, after all this stuff happened with Castle Wyvern, Macbeth came in and was the next king afterwards, and all of that stuff in City of Stone happened in that next time period. You can still have the basic backstory be the same.
All of medieval Scotland is Manhattan Island.
Yeah. They don't need to know all the nonsense about, Gilcombe Gain.
Yeah, we're barely following that.
She can have had that history with Macbeth in, the next 100 years or so of her lifespan.
Yes. Finally, there's so many villains you could easily adapt. They make such good Dungeons and Dragons bad guys.
I know I mentioned the pack, as an example of the thing you want us to talk about. But you don't need us to tell you how to do the pack.
Right,
They're awesome, they're mercenaries, they're horrible, they start out as regular mercenaries and then come back as horrible body horror mercenaries, and that's great. You don't need us to tell you how to use Savarius. He's a mad scientist.
He's a mad scientist.
Probably trained in Lemordia, that's fine. Just a bunch of really awesome villains who you can just, pick up and drop in your Ravenloft game.
Yes, it's so good. It's such a fertile source of NPCs that will specifically be interesting stories for your PC. Because they're interesting stories for the main characters of Gargoyles.
Who are the PCs of the show.
And speaking of the PCs of the show, we have the Manhattan Clan. We are having it be, they've been recently awakened, like Xanatos. We don't need to get into the skyscraper or whatever, but he was able to, with his massive network of resources and contacts, find the solution to the curse.
Yeah.
So
want it to be lifting it on top of one of the skyscrapers, it can be, but it could just be, there was this ritual. And whatever.
Super rare magical item that he's able to find to unflesh the stone. Then.
Yeah.
And so they are awakened, they've discovered Demona's character, they've discovered Xanatos is a big jerk, they discovered Elisa is not a big jerk, it's in fact the opposite of a big jerk. They are in the Watch Station Tower, City Watch, and it has a tower, and in the daytime you walk by and see gargoyles on that watchtower, because gargoyles on a lot of buildings in Castle Wyvern, because they have all these old legends about gargoyles, that's part of the sort of history of the city.
Yeah.
And then at night, there's weirdly not gargoyles on the watchtower. So they're working with Elisa, trying to protect the city. It's their nature. They're kind of an urban legend, right? Officially, gargoyles, if they ever existed, went extinct 1,000 years ago. But people keep talking about it. You get residents of Manhattan together, get a few drinks in them, and they might start saying they knew a guy. They knew a guy who was walking home at night and saw gargoyles, the statues move, and then the statue was gone. And,
so good.
And so they're kind of the boogeyman of the settings. As we said, that's important, that's critical, because that's a big thing we've had with adapting some stuff in Dungeons & Dragons. Mm-hmm. How to make this specific non-human race kind of fit that psychic space of monsters.
Yes.
In a way that you don't necessarily want, like, aarakocra PC to fit.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of Elisa, just because we have to mention Elisa, but, like, she's in the City Watch. Like, it takes care of itself. Like, she knows about the corruption of the Dracon family. That's, like, kind of her pet cause is bringing the Dracon family down. And, she's also found the Gargoyles and become an ally with them. Like, you can do whatever you want with, like, presumably your PCs aren't so madly in love with Chavez that they're going to, like, care one way or the other whether Chavez is, like, helping in this or if she's secretly corrupt and in Dracon and or Xanatos' pocket. But, like, the important one here is Elisa, and no matter what the City Watch is like in general in your version of Castle Wyvern, Elisa is absolutely 100% on the side of the angels, helping the Gargoyles and trying to bring the Dracons down. And the Xanatos as well, she's at it.
And that even fits if there is this kind of level of corruption or even just Xanatos in the power structure. It also kind of fits why she would be really looking to the Gargoyles for help. Because, like, she knows she can trust them. She knows they're not corrupt.
If it's those themes of betrayal, too, actually. If the police force in Wyvern is more like the police force in Gotham, then if it's those themes of, like, betrayal and you can't trust anyone.
And then to go a little later into the show from our sort of status quo point, we have the Avalon clan. And you could have that same backstory of after Demona's initial betrayal, the eggs were taken by some of the humans, so the grateful human survivors, raised somewhere else, maybe Avalon, maybe just like some other like secret place they were kind of kept in hiding. And the cool thing here is this is new gargoyles. You have the potential to introduce new gargoyles. It even makes sense in universe that like they heard about gargoyle sightings in Castle Wyvern.
Yeah.
So they've come to Castle Wyvern now because they thought they were the only gargoyles left to find these new gargoyles, to investigate. And then finally, at the very end of the series, we have the Hunters. I think this is a fantastic thing to introduce to this particular setting. Your PC's in the mix. We have the secret society of gargoyle hunters, started by Demona, because of course they were.
Of course they were. So everything is her fault. Everything is her fault.
And they also, like the Avalon clan, they hear about gargoyle sightings in Castle Wyvern. They come to Castle Wyvern and they start hunting the gargoyles, and they start rallying sort of the forces, and they even start taking advantage of this fear. They present themselves as monster hunters, and they kind of have this group they're starting, the Quarrymen, who are specifically anti-gargoyle, who present themselves to the citizens as just like, oh, we're just concerned citizens who are afraid of gargoyles.
If you've never heard of the Quarrymen, it's because you never watched the Goliath Chronicles. Please keep it that way.
Yes, keep it that way.
Please,
just
save yourself.
Credit us with the cool name. So, you can say, like, oh, we're just concerned citizens who've had encounters with these gargoyles. And you even get that nice, like, you are a citizen of Castle Wyvern, you saw gargoyles, these are the only people taking you seriously.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
And so you go to these meetings.
That's how you get radicalized.
That's how you get radicalized. And unbeknownst to the average member of the Quarrymen, this is just a sort of group being manipulated by the hunters to help this overall plan of hunting the gargoyles and ultimately trying to kill Demona.
Yeah.
So once again, you even have a like wonderful, you know, the horrible, radical jerks, but like they're also against the bad guy of the setting. Which is a great thing to throw at the PCs.
So good.
So, we have a vast tapestry of potential plot hooks. It's just mountains of plot hooks lying around, because this is literally 63 episodes worth of potential plot hooks.
Including multiple backdoor pilots, so that gives you even more plot hooks.
But what kind of story, what kind of guidance can you have for getting your PCs engaged with those plot hooks? What kind of story can then happen after they engage with those plot hooks? Rachel, what do you do with it?
Anything but go to Avalon.
Please don't go to Avalon.
Dread possibilities. There was a certain frustrating lack of direction in my investigation of Castle Wyvern. Although Xanatos ruled the domain, those legends of gargoyles seemed significant, particularly the recurrent image of Demona. try as I might, I could not bring these elements together into a cohesive picture. Only one thread connected them that I could see, the castle itself. Given his reputation, I was certain that Xanatos had moved it to his property for a reason, and that uncovering that reason was critical to understanding the realm. I anticipated, correctly, that Xanatos' ego would make him amenable to an interview, and I played the wide-eyed admirer as he gave me a rather tedious tour of his business operations, and a far more impressive look at his personal collection of magic items, although of course I had no doubt that only the most trivial of them were on display.
I've been forced to increase security ever since the Eye of Odin was stolen,
he said casually.
Of course, you already knew all about that.
I flinched. For a moment, I could see the Eye of Odin glowing, could feel myself crushed against the inside of my own skull to make room for Thanos as he bludgeoned his way in. I plastered on a polite smile, clasping my hands to keep them from shaking. Whatever do you mean?
I'm sure you did your homework before coming here. You must have heard about the theft.
His tone remained light, but I caught a touch of a smirk on his face. Ah. My smile had more teeth. I understand you perfectly now. The smirk gave way to a slight frown, and he handed me a finely embroidered handkerchief that must have cost more than my entire wardrobe. I took it, puzzled, then felt something wet on my upper lip. Marvelous! A running nose on top of the embarrassment of being so obviously discomfited. I dabbed at my nose with the handkerchief. It came away red. We made a few awkward pleasantries before Xanatos' chamberlain Owen escorted me from the premises. By creating a distraction with some well-aimed uses of Mage Hand, I was able to slip away and double back to the castle. Night had fallen, giving the ancient structure an eerie, haunted quality. Eldritch sight confirmed that the hair on the back of my neck was only rising due to an overactive imagination rather than to any magical auras, and I set to exploring as quickly as I could before Owen or Xanatos tracked me down. My initial impression was disappointment, for it seemed that the castle had primarily been converted into a living area. It had been enhanced with artificer magic to make it a luxurious modern home rather than an ancient ruin, but was this nothing more than a monument to David Xanatos' hubris? Was this simply his way of saying that, fisherman or no, he deserved to live in the rightful home of the ancient kings of Wyvern, and would literally look down upon his rivals from this towering vantage point? I caught movement from the corner of my eye and flattened myself against the battlements. As I did, I saw an odd pile of stone shards at my feet, as thin as parchment. I picked up a piece the size of my hand. It looked remarkably similar to the mist talisman that had brought me here. Something massive landed on the parapet behind me, snarling like a great cat. I whirled and found myself staring into the glowing red eyes of something that seemed ripped out of a nightmare, a creature of wings, claws, and teeth that towered over me as though I were a child. I immediately recognized her as Demona. Before I could say or do anything, she grabbed me by the arm and hurled me from the walls of the castle as easily as if I were a doll. Had Xanatos built a smaller monument to his ego, I would certainly have been killed. As it was, I had more than enough time to cast Fly before hitting the ground. I made my escape, having confirmed that gargoyles were entirely real, and that Xanatos is well aware of this fact.
I want adventure in the great wide somewhere.
I want it more than I can tell.
So what is the thing that brought your PCs to this towering canyon of glass and steel, this Scottish medieval Manhattan type pastiche we created? Other than Mickhatton, I love it. Other than the reason people go to Manhattan, like all the.
And I mean, honestly, that's enough.
Yeah.
Like, especially if it's Manhattan with like magic.
Yeah,
like, yeah.
This is the same thing we had with our Great Mouse Detective setting with Londinium. It's like, why do people go to London? Mm-hmm. Those are the reasons your PCs go there.
Yeah.
Why might they go to Manhattan? Because this is functionally Manhattan.
Yeah.
It's a mega city. It is super prosperous. It is a major center of trade.
Trade, culture, like,
academics.
Yeah.
So you've got good archives. You've got lots of libraries. You have got lots of museums or galleries that have really cool and important magical artifacts in them. We even have in kind of canon this sort of idea that all this magic stuff just kind of get pulled into Manhattan.
Yeah.
So like in the World Tour, cursed be its name, the one with the, like, Amazonian gargoyles, and there was, like, this magic thing that let them stay awake during the day, and it was in, like, the Met, or the Natural History Museum, or some museum in Manhattan. So we got to actually check in with the half of the characters we hadn't seen in 10 episodes or more.
Gosh.
So, you could do the obvious, trade caravans, whatever brings them there. Same thing with, like, Crescent City, New Orleans, what brings people there. Which I like, because it means you can do this adventure organically. You can have a million reasons, totally natural for your PCs to say, oh, let's go to that place called Castle Wyvern, and then you can do your whole whatever you want to do for your gargoyles. And then you can pull out your Jonathan Frakes impression, and you're ready to do whatever gargoyles adventure you have in mind. But a more significant one that's going to kind of get them more into the story and more connected in a very organic way. I think this was your idea.
Yeah, part of how we want to have a more significant and that's going to be a pattern with our small screen summer, because we mentioned all three of these are going to be domains where you could set an entire campaign there, because that's what the shows did. And that's going to be looking for a juicier hook.
Yes.
And if a trade caravan is great for a one-shot, but you're going to want something more significant for that if you're going to be there long enough to actually be dealing with Demona rather than just Xanatos.
Or even like, oh, there's this piece of magical lore or spell we need that's in the Grimoire Macmorum, and like this rich guy named David Xanatos has it in his private collection.
Yeah.
So let's go. Like that's a one-shot.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun gargoyle as one-shot. But we are really considering the baseline here. The default is the campaign, so we need a richer hook.
And I think a fantastic hook is to have Xanatos start out as your quest giver.
Yes.
That he is going to be hiring people, and your party is people, and it might be like just something straight up, he genuinely needs you for something, or you might be his version of the pack. He might be setting you up for some kind of nonsense. Or the thing I really love is it starts out legit, and then he sets you up for nonsense. And you get to follow that whole arc of finding out the whole, like, oh, this is Xanatos, he's our patron, not in the warlock sense, in the our regular quest giver sense. And then you find out what a scumbag he is.
Actually, yes, in the warlock sense.
And, like, it could start with, you're in other domains, and, like, Owen is approaching you, and, saying that Mr. Xanatos has a job for you.
Yes.
By the way, speaking of Owen, Tom I don't think he's ever made it to the point in Curse of Strahd running it where Rahadin shows up, but if he does, he is going to run Rahadin as Owen.
Yes, I am.
And then gradually you get pulled into Xanatos' schemes, because, it's Manhattan, you got to do the tourist stuff, you got to see a Broadway show, you got to do Central Park, and you got to get pulled into a scheme of Xanatos. And come to find out that he's a terrible person. And I think the best possible scheme to get pulled into...
Yes, I love this so much.
...is something involving awakening the Manhattan Clan.
Yes.
Because then you are there with them from the get-go. Yes. And then if any of your players want to play Gargoyles, then they can have kind of throwaway PCs for the first couple sessions who are helping out any PCs who want to play humans. And then, they go their separate ways, or they die, or they turn out to be, like, evil dupes of Xanatos or whatever. And then they get to take over their actual PCs when they awaken.
Yes, it's so good. We mentioned in our canon we're being deliberately vague about exactly how they awaken them. We just said it was somehow Xanatos had the resources to break the curse. It could be your PCs are helping with that, like they're hoping to track down the ritual texts, they're hoping to track down the spell ingredients they need, and then they get to be there when they awaken, and they're immediately, boom, hooked in to the story. But what kind of story might they be hooked into? What kind of stories would you tell in this imaginary TV show where your PCs are kind of playing that Elisa Maza role? And first off, as we mentioned, this is a full Curse of Strahd campaign. This is a level 1 to 11 campaign. It's possible to do one-shots. We've mentioned a couple possibilities, but really, we're presenting this to you as a framework for a full campaign.
So usually in an episode, when we're talking about the kind of stories to run here, again, we're looking at more kind of the movie thing, so we talk about, like, okay, how are you playing through the plot of Lion King? Like, how are you playing through Snow White? But again, with Small Screen Summer, you're going to be playing through more of a season, and there are so many plot hooks that it doesn't need to line up perfectly with any of the seasons that we see. And, like, how are you going to structure that game? How are you going to pace it? and what are going to be the major changes that you can make to the status quo, that you can improve things, like, the equivalent of, okay, Strahd is going to be going after the next Tatiana, but you saved Irina. So this particular Tatiana incarnation gets to go and live a happy life. Like, what's going to be your game's version of that? One example that we mentioned was a possibility that you could break up Demona and Xanatos' alliance.
Yes.
That this is something that's really benefiting both of them, and it's going to be really good for everybody if you break those two crazy kids up. Or if you start getting Xanatos' redemption arc rolling.
Right.
Having somebody with his wealth and his skills on Team Good Guy is going to be awesome for Team Good Guy.
We were also mentioned that we're imagining Elisa has this kind of personal quest to take down the Dracons. Mm-hmm. And that'd be a big feather in your cap. That would be like, okay, yes, Demona's still flapping around being crazy, but... But, like, we made this major positive change. This city's going to be a much better place now, and we made Elisa really happy.
Yeah.
And so now we can, sail off proudly into the sunset to see where Avalon takes us next. I mean, the GM takes us next.
Oh, wow. I just realized you actually could do... This isn't incorporating the older material. This is being self-indulgent and incorporating our stuff. There was the whole deadly force that the Dracons are, like, bringing in, the super awful guns. What if they're smuggling in Lady Eboshi's magic guns?
Love it.
And that can be the thing that you're doing, is getting rid of Lady Eboshi's magic guns. Getting them off the streets of Manhattan.
Yes! Those blunderbusses off the streets. So, as we mentioned, we had that initial hook idea of you're working for Xanatos. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's he asks you to recover a quote-unquote stolen magic item, or to guard something, or to find something, or any number of possibilities. In the write-up, I will have a chart of potential, like, missions Xanatos gives you. And you have 1, 2, 3, whatever amount you feel is right for the pacing of your game. And then they meet Elisa, they meet Goliath, they discover the truth. They discover their pawns, shocking, in this overall plan Xanatos has, and then they stop that. So you're kind of doing Awakening, part 2 through 5.
You could actually, because, your average PC is going to catch on pretty fast to the fact that they're pawns. Like, they're not going to need Elisa to tell them.
Beardy Riker guys.
You could have it be even a thing where, like, the Manhattan clan has kind of been duped by Xanatos and Demona for longer. Like, if you want to not be, like, awakening them, if you want to be brought in something else, and they're already working for Xanatos, it can almost be more of, like, a Frollo and Quasimodo thing. Right. If, like, they've been working for him for a while and you break them away. That could be another fun status quo if the Manhattan clan has basically been Xanatos' goons for, like, the past month. And you're able to tell them that actually this is a real shady guy.
Very cool. Ooh, I like it. So then you have, quote-unquote episodes. You have as many sessions as you like. You're introducing new NPCs, where you're clashing with Xanatos, you're clashing with Demona, you're clashing with Xanatos and Demona at the same time. Mm-hmm. And eventually building up to some big apocalyptic plan of Demona's.
And if you're the one who tells Goliath that Xanatos is bad instead of Elisa, then you're the one who broke up Goliath and Demona, so she's gonna hate you guys as much as she hates Elisa, and that's gonna put you in her sights. Like,
nice.
That's one of the big issues here, is that Demona is working pretty behind the scenes. Like, so much of the conflict is with Xanatos. Mm-hmm. That was even an issue that I was having when doing the D write-up. Mm-hmm. It's like, how the heck do I get her to meet Demona? And having them be closely involved with the Manhattan clan is a great way to put them on Demona's radar and make her hate them so much.
Oh, that's really good, yeah. And we're kind of doing a building the City of Stone, and then building to the Hunter's Moon, which is like kind of the series finale. Mm-hmm. So I'm also in the write-up going to have a chart of potential apocalyptic plans Demona.
Yes.
So you could even have kind of multiple apocalyptic plans, because she does.
Yes.
So it could be, if you wanted to just run like 100 sessions, you wanted a full 2-year-long campaign. You could even have, we mentioned these status quo changes, you have building up to sort of a City of Stone, like one apocalyptic event that splits her off with Xanatos, and then a kind of second phase of the campaign where now Xanatos is starting his redemption arc, ending with kind of him on the side of the angels helping you stop Demona's next big apocalyptic plan, doing Hunter's Moon.
Yeah. And at Hunter's Moon, I don't think it's going to be on our watch list because it's the series finale, so there's going to be a whole lot of other stuff beforehand. But all you need to know, Demona had a big apocalyptic plan. It was an even bigger and more apocalyptic plan than City of Stone.
So one final note on the pacing of this, we've mentioned this a couple of times, comparing the role of your PCs to the role of Elisa. We're basically pitching this as Oops, All Elisas. Our default mode with all of these settings is to imagine you have a pre-existing Ravenloft game. and you want to have those PCs come and have gargoyle adventures.
Yeah.
And that's Elisa. Like, she basically is a heavily armed transient.
Yes.
Except she lives there.
Yeah.
But she is like this
heavily armed native.
random, heavily armed, skilled person who gets pulled into this, like, magical nonsense.
Yeah.
And then is like, I'm in the party now.
Like, if you're planning on running, like, just straight up in Manhattan and some
Yes.
of your players want to play gargoyles, awesome. But if this is just part of your Ravenloft game, then yeah, oops all Elisa's.
Yeah, we've kind of mentioned this. It's our canon setting. That's our default setting. But absolutely, I love your idea for having gargoyle PCs. Because there is a good chance, if you have players that love gargoyles, they're like, I want to be a gargoyle.
Yes.
I don't want to be like a dumb warlock who came to Manhattan and met Goliath. I want to be stoned by day and a warrior by night.
Yes.
So, as we mentioned, we always have our kind of default canon setting, the official sort of DM's Guild write-up setting, but then we also like to talk about alternative settings in our Dread Possibilities section, talk about variants of this. And one that we always do is aging up and aging down, playing it with younger players who I assume parents show them the show. I don't think they're going to find it on their own.
If you remember gargoyles, you're old enough to have kids. So maybe you don't, but you're of that age.
And then the much more likely older players people who saw this in the 90s and opened their third eye. For narrative animation. So, the first with the aging down, the younger players do the show, right? Like, this is one of our smallest aging down sections we've ever had.
Yeah.
And I feel like we just kind of wrote do the show in like 4 different ways. Because it's just like, number one, it is such a D&D show.
Yes.
Like, it's kind of one of the reasons we're opening Small Screen Summer. We wanted to do this, not just because Demona is an amazing Dark Lord, that would be enough.
Yeah.
But because this show is fundamentally a fantastic D&D show.
Yeah.
And a lot of the stories of this show really fit the, like, play style and traditions and, like, problem-solving processes of D&D. And even the violence is a big part of the show, but they keep it very kid-friendly. And this would not be, like, a terrible model. If you're like, I want to do D&D for younger players, I want to have violence as part of it, because it's part of D&D.
Right.
Like, look at how they do violence in Gargoyles.
Other than Deadly Force.
Other than Deadly Force, yes. And really, like, if your kids are old enough to watch Gargoyles and, like, basically follow along, especially follow along Macbeth backstory
Oh my gosh.
Like, if you're old enough to watch Gargoyles, you're old enough to play, like, baseline D&D. So, really, that's all I have for aging down. As I said, basically 4 variations on do the show.
Yeah.
But, as we said, much, much, much more likely. And we have much more to say about this, because this is a more complex issue, a more likely issue. You have a group of, 35, 40-plus-year-olds who had never known a cartoon could give them such feelings in all sorts of ways. And how would you do it for older players, Rachel?
Okay, so we're definitely going to need to skip ahead on this one. Sometimes we need to skip ahead because it's content that could be upsetting for our adult listeners. I don't think there's any of that here. But if you were listening with kids in the room, we're going to be talking about some of those feelings that Gargoyles gave us. This episode is going to take a PG-13 rated bent. So if you are listening with kids in the room, then future Rachel is going to come in and tell you how far to skip ahead now. Hello, dear listeners. We discussed some of the racism in the Gargoyle setting, but for the most part, the adult content here is a very PG-13 related discussion of the general vibe of Gargoyles and the general vibe of the way that Demona tends to look at people when she's working them. If you have big-eared little pitchers in the room, you're going to want to skip ahead about 5.5 minutes. Okay, so for a non...
Yeah, right, let's get that stuff out of the way.
Yeah.
Get the non-horny stuff out of the way.
If Rachel is low-key thirsty is on your bingo sheet, you are in for a
You're lucky you got
great...
Gargoyles.
So, for the non-horny part, you can do more with the prejudice. As always, session 0 it.
Right, sure.
But, like, we talked about how weird it is that they have this prejudice against gargoyles and they're terrified of gargoyles, and you've got, like, your dragonborn and your tiefling and your Hadazi wandering around.
Like, a dragonborn and a aarakocra and, like, a tiefling are basically, put them together, you had a gargoyle.
Yes.
So why is, like...
Throw in a Hadazi and you've got Lexington.
that cool? Why is that fine? And everyone's like, oh no, whoa, monsters!
And for an aging up version, maybe it's not fine. Maybe, if you're basically human looking, or even if you're non-human looking, but you still don't look like a gargoyle.
Yeah.
Then you're all right. But the more you have wings, or horns, or fangs, or anything like that, all of those basically for the people in Wyvern kind of read like a tiefling. That, you get all of the prejudice that tieflings normally have to deal with, but it's being shown toward dragonborn and Hadazee and aarakocra.
And that's even a great, easy metric for, wait, so, a dwarf's okay, but this is it's just the easy metric of, do you look like a gargoyle?
Yeah.
Could you be mistaken for a gargoyle in the dark alley? People are racist to you.
Yeah.
Do you not look like a gargoyle? You're cool.
Because it's giving them demon vibes. And we mentioned the Quarrymen, which they're from the Goliath Chronicles. Don't watch the Goliath Chronicles.
Take our word.
Yeah, it's season 3. It's bad. But season 2 ends with everyone finding out the gargoyles exist, and the Quarrymen are basically the Friends of Humanity from X-Men.
Mm-hmm.
And you could do something with this idea of the hunters. They need to keep the prejudice and the fear stoked. In case they get another gargoyle sighting, so that they can stick the Quarrymen on Demona, and so they have to find the people who are as gargoyle looking as they can find, so you can have it be that the Quarrymen are, tracking down tieflings.
And that might be nice, because you might say, I think it would be fun to explore these themes of prejudice, but I maybe don't want it to be, oppressive, omnipresent discrimination.
Yeah.
You'd be it's just these assholes. You got this, faction of jerks in matching t-shirts. And it can be just, those guys are the racist jerks making everyone's life miserable. But, the baseline people you interact with, you don't have to have that continual miasma of prejudice. It's just, just these assholes.
Yeah, so, we've eaten
what
our
we're
vegetables.
here for. Yes.
This show
Yeah.
was so horny.
So horny.
So horny. We were talking about this with Demona is voiced by Marina Sirtis.
Right.
And this is kind of your thing.
Yeah, so she's also Counselor Troy, in case you didn't realize.
Who's a character on Star Trek The Next Generation.
If you're listening to this, you know.
You're right.
You know
You're
that.
right.
If you're listening to the aging up section of our Gargoyles episode, you know who Counselor Troy is. I reckon.
Yeah.
But so anyway, if you didn't, she's a character on Star Trek Next Generation, and she's the counselor. And Star Trek, they're kind of going for it's this very sexually progressive utopia. Counselor Troy is this very emotionally connected, kind of earthy, very very open character, on paper. In canon, Counselor Troy has had a lot of sex. And, in canon, Demona hasn't. That's never come up.
Yeah, we know she and Goliath were basically married. We know that she and Thalog were knocking boots for a while. But, we only know of, 3 people Demona was having sex with.
But, holy wow, the performance and the just sort of vibe of both of those shows. Star Trek Next Generation is such a very sexless show in terms of the vibe, and Gargoyles is so horny.
Yes.
Demona is such a more sexually charged character than Counselor Troy is, despite what the canon sex lives on the wiki might say.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about how hot Demona is.
Right,
there is a point here.
Believe it or not.
One way that can manifest is that she absolutely uses sex to manipulate people. We see that in, this wasn't going to be on our watch list because to heck with the World Tour, but there was one where in her human form she's seducing somebody basically and doing a marriage trick thing to get his money. But the big one, we mentioned the episode Temptation, where she's kind of tricking Brooklyn into thinking that all humans are bad. And the very first adult fanfic I ever read, dear listeners, was about what was going on off screen in
when
that
the
episode.
camera's cut.
And I know, everyone says this, but I mean it. It wasn't because I, like, shipped those two and wanted to read those hot and heavy scenes. It was because I was like, I knew it. Because, oh my gosh.
Yes.
She is so, like, tapping into how hot Brooklyn has been for Teacher for his entire life. And, like, you can see she's, talking about all the things she's been through in her past 1,000 years of life. I'd like to tell you about it. Ducks head, looks through eyelashes. If you'll let me.
No, this is full Nala and the Lion King's do me face kind of deal. So yes, this is not just a chance to acknowledge the horny elephant in the room. This is a deeply and profoundly horny show. This is something that is going to, as Rachel said, affect the way you run Demona. Especially if we have human form Demona in our canon, so there's going to be a whole thing.
Yes.
And it's going to affect, like, her tactics, interacting with potential allies, potential enemies. So that is something we have to acknowledge and put here in our aging up section.
Yeah.
We are doing this for the articles, dear listeners.
I love you. And look, you've got the pack, you've got the body horror.
Yeah.
That was Baby's first body horror.
Yeah, it sure was.
Like, you can absolutely do a lot more with them and with Dr. Savarius.
Just to end on a little, like, cool down note.
Yes.
Restore a little bit of our dignity.
Yes. I love you. And then, like, for other things with Demona.
Yeah, right.
With the gargoyles, you can get into how just physically intimidating they are. Like, and you can do this with the Manhattan Clan, too. You can make the Manhattan Clan much scarier and more alien.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these guys are huge. Yeah. These guys tower over you. These guys have enormous claws.
Glowing eyes.
Like, Goliath could absolutely accidentally kill you.
Yeah.
And there are some episodes where they basically, like, shoot it like a slasher movie. And you could absolutely do some really scary cat and mouse stuff with Demona as a monster hunting your BCs.
Absolutely, yeah. So, we always have the aging down, the aging up section, but
aging way up in this
one. But we also have some other AUs. If we come up with ideas for other AUs, this is where we put that in our Dread Possibilities. And this is one where, just because we have such an expansive... I think this is going to be a feature, probably the other small screen channels too. We have such an expansive world. Mm-hmm. There's a couple different AUs.
Yeah, there's a couple, like, different times where you could set it.
Yeah.
And there are a couple things that we haven't really had time to touch on in this episode, that they're not, like, a major part of our domain, but they're a major part of the show, and you can bring those in.
So we mentioned the possibility of the Avalon clan of other gargoyles, but you could really, like, change season, quote-unquote season, like, really throw the status quo for a loop if you brought in Angela. Mm-hmm. If you had Angela coming from Avalon in some way, this would be such a huge change for Demona. If you're like, we've done Demona and she's kind of one note and all of our interactions are kind of the same, and we want to do something different, this would be that. This would be the easiest way to organically, in character, suddenly, like, switch up how those interactions are going to go.
Yeah, I don't think Angela's going to be anywhere on our episode watchlist. Angela is the daughter that Demona didn't know she had. Like, her literal daughter.
Yes.
Not like...
My girl!
No, she's, like, literally Demona finds out that she has a daughter.
Yes.
And this, like, changes everything for her. And even that she's got lots of plans that are going to kill the Manhattan Clan, but she would never kill Angela.
Yes. And the neat thing is, it's like, Demona's not going to have a redemption arc, but in the show, this kind of raises the possibility in some characters' minds that she could have a redemption arc. Especially Angela's very, like, never really willing to 100% write off Demona.
Yeah.
And that could be something, once again, to sort of throw the interactions for a loop. To be able to have your PCs go, wait a minute, is there going to be a redemption arc?
Yeah.
Could we do that?
And then on the flip side, if you could do it as kind of like a redemption kind of thing. If you want to do it as kind of they think it's a redemption, but then it turns out that's a fake out and she's just going to triple down, then if she has this grievance against humans, she thinks humans can't be trusted, they're going to kill everyone, that includes her daughter. Her poor innocent daughter who thinks that humans can be trusted and doesn't know how to protect herself, so mom's got to do what mom's got to do and kill all those humans to keep Angela safe. So this could be the thing that kicks off a much bigger, more apocalyptic plan.
Yeah. Like, I really see the rough story of the campaign as you come in, you kind of meet them, you meet the Manhattan Clan, you do sort of awakening, parts 2 through 5. You have some kind of apocalyptic event as you're like getting to know Xanatos and kind of building relationships. Then it caused him to break from Demona and start his redemption arc. Then you do some more stuff with that. Then you bring in Angela, and that shifts all the status quo. And then that's building to the kind of finale of Demona apocalyptic plan.
Yeah.
And then speaking of Xanatos, some of you clicked on the podcast, opened the MD Guild write-up, and were like, wait, Xanatos isn't the Dark Lord. What's going on here? And you're right, because he's a fantastic Dark Lord, too. And so that is, of course, one of the AUs we're going to give you. Xanatos is Dark Lord.
And also, this actually does connect with Angela, because, like, if you want Xanatos as your Dark Lord, then that lets you redeem Demona.
Yes.
So if you want to be able to do that, then Angela could be the thing that lets you do it. If, in your heart of hearts, you always wanted to see Demona finally just make a healthy choice and accept things and get on with her life, Dark Lord Xanatos will let you do that.
Yes, it will. You know, Xanatos, we don't need to talk too much about him as a Dark Lord because, you know, it is obvious how he would do, how he'd function. He's the prince of the city. He's super wealthy. But in terms of a torment that would kind of drive the plot, we have a big one that right there in the canon, right there in the show, he's terrified of death. And the way I was looking for quotes for the DM's Guild write-up, and I found some quotes for the episode whose name escapes me, where he has the cauldron of life. Yeah. And he's planning to, like, use the gargoyle stuff to become immortal. And I was like, oh man, I kind of want to do Xanatos as a Dark Lord just because these quotes are so good for role-playing trait, ideal, bond, and flaw. And Hudson says, like, you're terrified of aging and death. Or you're afraid of aging. You're very afraid of aging and death. And Xanatos says something like, I'm not afraid of anything because there isn't anything I can't change.
So great.
And that's it. Like, no, all of his guile and all of his riches and all of his brilliance, like, he can't stop aging and death. And so he's terrified of it, and he'll try plan after plan after plan to become immortal, and they're all going to fail. And every day he wakes up a little bit older.
Yeah.
Every day he might wake up and wonder when he's going to start seeing gray in his hair. So in the show, of course, you have this wonderful, this is the redemption arc we talked about. He, you know, gets married, they have a child, he sort of realizes there's more to life than money, and also like, oh, I don't have to be afraid of getting old and dying, because I have this family and have this son to carry on my legacy.
Yeah.
And I kind of found something that means more to me than my own success, my own power. But we wouldn't have that here.
Yeah. Or even if you did, like, you could either have that he doesn't have the son, which, you know, again, at the time that we're setting it, he doesn't. Or there was this really bizarre episode where there's, like, a fake dystopian future.
Yes.
It's so ridiculous.
What an episode.
It's so ridiculous. It's a fake dystopia called Xanatopia.
Yes.
It's amazing.
It's worth doing that just to have Xanatopia.
Yes. But in Xanatopia, there's even a, like, his son joins the rebels and he kills his son. And so that's like, oh, you had your chance at immortality and you threw it away.
And that's the obvious one. That's the in-canon one. Also in canon, this wouldn't work as like a driver of plot, but you have the whole his father will never be proud of him. Which is the great redemption arc that in the Gathering he does like win his father's respect because he's fighting to protect his family, but we don't have that here.
No.
We don't have that arc. So he just has to kind of every day wake up and know that his father's not proud of him.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned this when talking about the city council. We mentioned this whole, it's a political viper's nest. That he's always watching his back. Like, he never gets to just sort of revel and luxuriate in his power and wealth. It's like, every day, there's 100 fires he has to put out.
Yeah.
And if he missteps, his enemies will pounce.
It's a thing I didn't really put my finger on. This is another weird episode where I finished the Deeds Journal already. This doesn't usually happen. But it was a thing I didn't really put my finger on until I was writing the Deeds Journal. And made the comparison to Borka, which I didn't just do because I love Borka. It was an apt comparison. And thinking about no, in some ways, like, Xanatos is in a much more precarious position than Ivan or Ivana because he is a self-made man. That, like, they have the power of their names behind them. They have, like, family and, like, you know, how much are the Delistnias worth as family, really? They're all trying to kill you. But at the same time, it's like, as long as they see you as being the top dog who they can't beat, they will come to your aid. Whereas Xanatos doesn't even have that, like, family loyalty to bank on. So that is the flip side of being the self-made man, is that, he pulled himself up by his bootstraps, and he's got to keep on doing it every day.
So, lots of options for a torment. You can clearly see how he'd run as a Dark Lord. If you were wondering, we're going to talk about Xanatos as a Dark Lord. here we are.
Yep.
And then one, we have continually slagged the World Tour arc.
Mm-hmm.
And we have done very, 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 very little because of that with this whole big element that became hugely important in the second half of Season 2, the Children of Oberon. But you could do that.
Yeah.
They're honestly, like, in the framework of this as a D&D game, the Children of Oberon could be a really interesting thing to bring in. You even have a perfect D&D equivalent of it's the Fae.
Yeah, yeah. And another part of why we haven't really talked about the Children of Oberon as much is because there's the perfect D&D equivalent, so it's like, what is there to talk about? They're the Fae. So you can just have that there are a bunch of Fae around.
Yeah,
There's Fae. Like, it's really easy to bring in the Children of Oberon.
You could maybe get something really good out of that basic World Tour structure of starting in Castle Wyvern, in the city, getting on the magic boat of Tedium, and having it take you to all these different domains.
The problem with the World Tour, gentle listeners, and this is something that actually they talked about on the Gameable podcast, and that really helped me to put my finger on it. The problem with the World Tour isn't its existence, because that's the structure of sliders and Quantum Leap,
right,
and like I don't know what something in the 21st century would be.
Oh.
It's supernatural. They're road tripping around, and like so the problem isn't that like roving around doing the Monster of the Week structure. It's that it's the equivalent of you start your game, and I'm taking this analogy lock, stock, and barrel from the Gameable podcast, but you start your game and everyone puts like all of their resources and background stuff into this specific setting, and they put all this investment into these NPCs and relationships in this setting, and then you take them away for a Monster of the Week World Tour kind of thing, and none of that stuff that matters to them is around anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. But if that's your game from the beginning, or if you make it clear to your PCs that that's going to happen, so don't get too set on Wyvern as a setting, then you can have a great game out of it.
Yes, this is a way to do a kind of perfect superstructure for a domain hopping, like I want to do basically a world tour of Ravenloft. I want to go to each of these domains. I'm going to deal with some kind of Oberon's Children-derived monster that's thematic to that domain, and then we end up back in Castle Wyvern for a big explosive climax. And like that is a real solid campaign structure, especially if you're like, I want to do the tour of Ravenloft, I want to do the like hit all the domains I'm interested in. This is a really good, simple framework that will give you that world tour and then also kind of have a sort of narrative cohesion. It's not just, you're not just Scooby-Dooing around waiting for your van to stop and find a mystery. You have more of a structure than that. So, we've talked about playing this with younger players, or with older players, that maybe this was a big part of their formation.
Goliath and Demona standing on Castle Wyvern, gazing into each other's eyes.
Yeah.
That is my sexual orientation.
Bringing in Angela, having Xanatos as a Darklord, even possibly doing a redeemed version of the World Tour. But now let's give you our parting thoughts in a section we like to call
Parting Thoughts.
So the first thing we like to do in our parting thoughts section is the genre of horror. This is from Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. It's a really fantastic section of that book. They go through a bunch of different genres of horror and then talk about their hallmarks and their aesthetic signifiers. And then they classify the domains by those genres of horror as a guide to helping you evoke the proper horror feeling for that domain. And it's a fantastic read, even just if you're interested in horror in general, not 100%. Just for like Ravenloft. So I have one obvious.
Yes, same.
And I feel like we're on the same page, because there is one obvious.
1, 2, 3.
Dark fantasy.
Yep.
I was unscripted, guys. That wasn't a bit.
Nope.
So, dark fantasy.
Obviously.
It's dark, it's fantasy.
There's
it's fantasy that's
superstition
dark.
And
the sword rules.
There's magic items. There's
there's
fairies.
Curses. There's magic spells and grimoires. And this is where I first heard the word grimoire, I think.
Same.
And it's such a fantasy show, and even like for a kid's show, this is a darker fantasy.
Definitely.
This is a slightly more brutal, more vicious, more spooky adjacent fantasy. So like dark fantasy.
Definitely.
Did you have any other thoughts?
Possibly gothic.
Oh, really?
I'm not in love with it.
No, go on.
Okay, past reaching into the present.
Right.
You've got, like, the Gothic castle and everything. You've got kind of, like, all of Demona's past sins kind of coming forward and being, like, reflected here. Demona can be a Gothic corruptor. I'm not in love with it, but if you put a Demona's laser bazooka in my head and
then
said,
hit you with it as a club.
and then hit me with it as a club, and said pick a second genre, it would be Gothic.
The big thing, I didn't think about Gothic, that's got a lot of true. The big thing is Demona is our big Gothic figure, but that she doesn't have the kind of psychic space.
That's true.
Right? It's like Castle Wyvern is Xanatos' space, not her space.
We never really see her lair.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like a big part of the story.
Yeah. And Manhattan's not like Demona's space either, in the way that it is for some of the other Darklords.
Like, Xanatos, honestly, has a lot of your Gothic. Because, like we were talking about this, there's the amazing, perfect, iconic image of the castle on the skyscraper.
Yes.
And that could be a Gothic space very easily, Xanatos' lair. And he could be the corruptor, but there's not the past reaching into the present.
Honestly, I feel like all of the Gothic signifiers, frankly, and this makes sense because it isn't a horror show at its heart, all the Gothic signifiers are frankly there for Goliath. Yeah. The idea of it being like the castle on top of the skyscraper and him being like this figure from the past pulled into the present and everything. And it's, he's a Gothic hero, not a Gothic villain. But like, I feel like all that Gothicness is him.
The other one I was leaning toward was psychological. Specifically the idea of it being defined by betrayal. And mistrust and paranoia. And like the kind of, there's just this miasma of distrust in the air. And that's definitely like an element, but I wouldn't go for a full-on secondary genre of horror.
I think it's one of those that's
dark fantasy, yeah. Because that's not an issue for the heroes. Like that's not like, that's kind of what defines the heroes against the villains, is the villains are always tearing each other apart with betrayal and distrust, whereas the heroes are the ones who are able to kind of trust and accept and believe in each other. Yeah, and I think it's one of those that we talked about with, like, Great Mouse Detective, where you've got this one dominant genre, but if you wanted to, you could bring in a whole bunch of other secondary genres. Absolutely. And that's how you want your Wyvern game to be flavored. Yes. So if you want to bring in the psychological horror and really have it be like webs of deceit and betrayal and playing up this whole idea of the dirty cops and, maybe Bluestone's bad. The Illuminati. Or if you want to do body horror and do a lot with the Pack and Dr. Savarius. Or if you want to do Gothic, if you want to, like, really dive into developing Demona's manner that she's got and that we see in the mirror and everything. Like, there are a lot of options that you can have for bringing in a secondary element, but I feel like the baseline. The canon setting. So, if you have decided that you like the dark fantasy and you want to maybe bring in one of these genres of horror that we see more strong in some of the older material in Ravenloft, especially maybe the 2E, 3E setting stuff, is there older material, he says, glancing at the script, seeing a particular domain's name in all caps, is there older material that you could bring into this Castle Wyvern adventure? Well, now I have to lead with that one. There is, and in our script, in all caps, as it so often does, it says, Borka, 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 gosh de Borka. Yes, it does. Again, I swear it's not just because I am madly in love with Borka, but there are a lot of parallels to some of the older material, what it was doing with Borka, because one of the big conflicts in old Borka, when it was much more of a conflict between Ivan and Ivana. Now in new Borka, it's like Ivan's trying to get Ivana's attention and everything, and like he thinks that maybe she's going to be the one who like actually will stay and play with him. In the older stuff, they were always at each other's throats, and a big part of the conflict was that Ivan is a Delisnia. They go all the way back to, there were Delisnias at Strahd's wedding. Like, they're one of the oldest noble families in the core. And Ivana, she is Delisnia on her mother's side, but, her surname's Baritsi. She takes a lot of, signifiers and stuff from the Baritsi side of her family, and they're nouveau riche. And, her dad is this up-jumped merchant who married into the Delisnias. And, oh my gosh, how dare that new money come in here and do that. So there's a lot of interesting parallels with Xanatos there. Like, you could do some interesting things with, like, maybe Xanatos and Ivana, like, kind of have an alliance. Like, they are these two big mercantile empires. They do kind of get each other in a way, but at the same time, Ivana is nobility, so, she might be, like, have lording it over him. They might love each other. They might hate each other. They might both. Who knows? Could be fun. Ivan absolutely hates Xanatos with the fiery passion of the 1,000 burning suns.
You could do something really interesting with the Dracons, like with them being this noble family that's really involved in crime. Maybe the Dracons are an offshoot of the Delisnias, which opens up a whole lot of plugs. Because again, they do both begin with D. Because the Delisnias are everywhere. So that would give the Dracons fingers in all kinds of pies all over Ravenloft. So that could be some really interesting stuff if you wanted to kind of be connecting Borka to Wyvern in this way. And if you want to do that, let's be friends.
It strikes me, thinking about the number of times Borka shows up in this section, and thinking about you continually insisting this is not just you're indulging your love of Borka. Like, let's take you at your word.
Okay.
And it made me think about it, and I think one of the reasons Borka will connect it so much is that of a lot of your core domains, Borka is the one that's based more on a work of history, historical time period, than like the novel Dracula, the novel Frankenstein, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a dark Lich King Wizard Tower, like dark Gary Gygax D&D set adventure. And because of that, because it's sort of the, super corrupt, poisonous Viper's Nest Renaissance Italy, it's got a more developed sense of commerce and politics.
Yes.
That, like, you really have to stretch to be like, okay, in Barovia, what's the principal export and what's their, like, and you can make it work, but that's not, like, what Barovia is about. It's about really Strahd posing on a tower while lightning flashes behind him. Whereas, no, this is, like, supposed to be that kind of very deep, rich, thematic, iconic setting of Renaissance Italy, Viper's Nest, poison. Renaissance Italy is described by someone that hates Renaissance Italy.
Yes.
But like that setting means it's got this whole, there's commerce, there's trade, there's these merchant houses. They have this complicated web of commercial connections. There's this complicated politics of these cities.
Like the fact that, Renaissance Italy wasn't like a single unified government. There were all of these like warring city-states and everything, and people trying to unite them or not. That's kind of the situation Xanatos is finding himself in with all of these warring houses. And it's actually occurring to me that, like, I know it's very hard for a lot of people to hang their hat on Borka precisely because it's, doesn't have that core narrative. And I completely understand that.
Yeah, it's not about Strahd posing on a tower while lightning flashes.
I get I'm a weirdo for Borka being my favorite. I'm not like, why don't the rest of you love her like I do? I understand. And if you want to kind of get what I love about Borka, but you don't want to run a game set in Borka because you don't quite get it, then running something in Wyvern actually could give you a lot of that. It's got the politics, it's got the faction, it's got the backbiting and the intrigue and who do you trust and this and that and the other thing. And especially if you're having some of Xanatos' rivals in the city council be more active, or if you're having it be right at the point where Demona is about to turn on Xanatos, and you're having like these chess games going on, you could get, like, kind of a Borka game and get all the things I love about Borka, but it's Gargoyles. And if you're a 90s kid, what's not great about that?
Like, it's even got that core narrative and that core hook in a way that Borka maybe doesn't necessarily have that core hook for you.
Yeah.
So, wow. Longer discussion of Borka than in the outline.
Yeah, really.
What about some other stuff?
Well, what's some other stuff?
We're going to talk here all night. Talking about Borka.
So just to get through the domains real quick before we get to kind of overarching issue if you're doing the older things, we can run through some of the other domains real quick and how they connect. I was trying very hard, dear listeners, to connect this to Forlorn, because Forlorn is the canon medieval Scottish domain. But, like, the only way I can really get them to connect is if you say that they came from the same world originally. Like, Forlorn it's very rural, it's like druids, it's ghosts, the genres of horror are completely different. It's much more of a ghost story, and like, it doesn't have this whole cosmopolitan thing that we're doing with Wyvern. It is like this extremely like, just blasted forests and druids and goblins and everything.
It sounds like it would be perfect for Awakening Part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But not Manhattan.
Exactly.
You can't put Manhattan in the rural medieval Scotland.
Exactly. So if you wanted to have some Easter eggs that the two of them were originally from the same world, if you want to, like, pull some of the same family names out and say that, like, when you're going through the histories learning about Demona, you see stuff about the App Blanks and the App Fiddles and, like, all these other Farfarian families. That'd be cool, but that's really the only thing I can think of to do with Forlorn.
It could also be a fun Easter egg if, like, you go to Forlorn or have a PC from Forlorn, And then they come to Castle Wyvern, and they're like, some of the language is the same.
Oh, yeah, that'd be cool.
Maybe some of the customs, like some of the styles of dress. Like,
Yeah.
you're like, this seems like a modified version of what you saw in Forlorn.
Oh, that would be cool. Yeah. You could do something interesting with the idea of the Shadow Fae, because, we were talking about the Children of Oberon and how they're a big part of Gargoyles. And, with the Shadow Fae, it is the idea that they're only active at night, and that tends to be when the Fae are active in Gargoyles, because that's when the plot happens in Gargoyles. So the idea that their Shadow Fae works, and then, especially if you do one of the homebrew things that I usually do, because they have it be that sunlight kills the Shadow Fae, and that really limits the stories you can tell with them, so I usually have it be that they can't use their powers during the day, and that way you're not, nerfing Owen and Fox's mom.
Honestly, that would work perfect for Owen, to do a sort of, Dracula style. During the day, he's just, kind of stuck as being the human Owen Burnett. Yeah. And he has the powers of a very efficient, bespectacled man, who I guess is also good at kung fu.
Yes.
But then at night, he can go full puck.
Yes, and he doesn't have to, but he can. Also, time passes differently in the Shadow Rift, so if you wanted to do something kind of like Avalon, where they've taken the eggs to this Fae place, and, time has slowed down there, you could have it be connected to the Shadow Rift. Canonically, time passes faster, not slower in the Shadow Rift, but, what are the odds you've done anything with that in your game? Right. If you wanted to be passing slower there, go ahead. Or if you have done something with that, or if it makes your brain hurt to change the canon, you are seen, you are loved, you are validated.
It's a safe space for you.
Yes. You could have there be, some other Fae space where time passes more slowly, and that could even work of, it's been this space that's been unclaimed for a while, and then Maeve and Lode are going to come back and claim it, and you get to do the gathering. So, there's lots of stuff there. So the big thing, dear listeners, if you're using the older material and kind of the older canon, the big kind of obstacle here is with 5e, time is explicitly stated to be very fuzzy, it's very dream logic-y, it's very Groundhog Day, whereas in the older material, they wanted there to be this set calendar. And Barovia came into the core about 400 years ago, Ravenloft is about 400 years old. This is a problem when our Act of Ultimate Darkness was 1,000 years ago. So,
when Superstition the Sword rule.
Yes. So trying to square that circle might be an issue for you if you're using the older material where there is that set calendar. You have a couple of options there. One of them is if you want to stick with that, it was 1,000 years ago, that was for Act of Ultimate Darkness, bada bing, bada boom. You could have it be, instead of time moving more slowly in Avalon, it's that time moves more quickly in Castle Wyvern. So, it was 400 years, but they feel like it's 1,000 years. Personally, what I would do is something that they've done with some of the other Darklords, where they clearly committed their Act of Ultimate Darkness before Barovia created Ravenloft, before Strahd created Ravenloft. And the dark powers, in whatever form they were in, kind of were looking at them saying, we've got a project, we want to tap you for it later. And
we're going to keep your resume on file.
And then after Ravenloft got created...
We're not ready to hire yet, but... once we get our ducks in a row, you're going to be hearing from us.
Exactly. And so once Ravenloft got created, they kind of waited for whatever mildly bad thing they did. And we're yoink. So a big example here is Lord Soth. If you're a Dragonlance person, obviously Lord Soth's Act of Ultimate Darkness was he could have stopped the cataclysm, but he went back to kill his cheating wife. His not actually cheating wife instead, right? That's pretty bad.
Ultimate and dark.
But it was pre-Strahd. So, later... I don't even remember what it was. It was,
some nonsense,
the Siege of Palanthus, and, when he took Kittyar to hell, and it's
those are bad,
this was a person you loved, and you took her to hell. That's your Act of Ultimate Darkness, and not compared to not stopping the cataclysm.
Yeah, right.
So, Demona did something bad in the past 400 years.
Also, easiest solution to this problem is just not have it be 1,000 years.
Well, I thought about that. I did think about that.
Okay. Lie, baby.
But it feels like too much of a change. If we're
right,
going
medievals
from
to
medieval Scotland,
to Manhattan,
Macbeth, even if we're not worrying about the Gargoyles themselves, going from what we saw Macbeth doing in City of Stone to the 90s future. I can't see that happening in 400 years. I'm just too much of a...
You could also just be, like, super vague about the timeline and never give a date and just say, like, centuries ago.
Yeah, that works too.
1,000 years is a number of centuries.
It is.
400 years is a number of centuries. Centuries ago, this thing happened.
Yeah, that would be an easy thing to do, but it would be an ice pick in my brain that, like, no, 400 years ago, that would have been the Renaissance, though. Demona's not Renaissance. I know this in doing a lot of the write-ups. I have to be, like, some ages, in ages past, many years ago. It could be many years ago. It could.
1,000 is very many years.
Dear listeners, in college, I did my senior thesis on Chaucer, and my best friend did her senior thesis on the Anglo-Saxon riddles, and people assumed we were doing our stuff in the same time period. And a little bit of that is coming out right now. I love you so much.
All right, now that Nerd Corner's over.
And, you don't need me to tell you how to connect Sevarius and Lamordia.
He's from Lamordia.
You don't need me to tell you how great it would be if Macbeth and Octopot teamed up because they both want to die. Like, there are lots of ways to incorporate other Darklords in their stuff. Yeah.
Like Octopot, you could do the Tony Shalhoub, Anubis world tour story in Heracles.
Oh, holy potatoes, that'd be so great.
Yeah,
oh my
right.
gosh.
Like, that's the thing is, honestly, because a lot of these domains are these sort of iconic settings with kind of like a supernatural, mythological edge, you could really easily take a chunk of the world tour and have it be a world tour of Ravenloft.
Yeah.
So, like, that's your Heracles one. You could have Forlorn with your dumb Ireland Cuchulainn.
Keening.
Like,
That would be Keening. With the dumb Ireland Cuchulainn.
some island with big statues of aliens or whatever.
God.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Oh, the world tour is so bad.
Easily you could do something with Markovia and the Island of Dr. Moreau thing and have a thing there.
Oh, yeah. Forlorn, you could do the Loch Ness Monster.
There you go. There is a Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
I forgot there was a Loch Ness Monster episode. Golly,
there was a
World
Loch
Tour.
Ness Monster episode.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wasn't Xanatos trying to hurt it with subsonic rays or something?
Sevarius was.
Okay,
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of Sevarius being from Lamordia. I'm like, he's so from Lamordia that, like, every year when Lamordia University's having the big Mage Tower game against the University of Illinois, he, like, goes to watch the game, like, with his
school colors.
With his sweater. With his Lamordia U sweater and his little pennant. Oh, Lamordia U!
He finds a way to bring it into every conversation.
Yeah, right, golly. Little pen in his lap, has a little Lamordia U pennant.
He had one conversation with Victor. It was the best day of his life.
Yeah, right.
He acts like they're on a first-name basis.
Well, Victor, that's what I call Dr. Mordenheim, once told me. There's only one thing he says, because she told him one thing. So, as our delighted giggling is probably indicating, we have a lot of strengths, but also some challenges.
Yes.
So let's wrap up our parting thoughts with a discussion of the strengths and challenges of running a Castle Wyvern game. Strength is great. I mean, it's freaking it's Gargoyles.
It's Gargoyles, guys. It's Gargoyles.
It's like with a couple of these, with Tron, with Labyrinth, we've said the best argument we can make is it's that. And that's enough for some of you.
Yeah.
Like,
if you're a listener of a certain age.
Right. And same things here. Like, if you're a hashtag 90s kid, I'm willing to bet the fact that it's Gargoyles is enough of a setting.
Yeah.
But even more than either of those other two examples, this honestly is a better D&D setting.
100%.
Than either Tron or Labyrinth.
It has such a good story engine.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Gosh, yeah. It's such a Dungeons and Dragons setting. And it's such a Dungeons and Dragons, like, your average Gargoyles episode. You could be like, oh, here's when they roll this. Here's when they roll this. Here's when he uses his inspiration. You can really break down a lot of the action and the story beats in terms of a D&D game.
Yeah.
And Xanatos is an amazing villain. And the one thing I love about this, it's one of the reasons, as I said, we did not make him our Dark Lord, is that then gives you total ability to have the PCs do whatever. Like, your PCs can kill Xanatos.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in our canon setting that would stop that from happening.
They could kill him, they can flip him, they can do, he can be arrested and be rotting in prison, whatever you want to do.
There is that kind of core status quo, but it's where sort of this, we've talked, what was it when I was talking about comparing Dark Wars to the Joker, I think Big Hero 6?
I think so.
Yeah, and it's that whole, honestly, one of the best narrative models for Dark Wars to not be annoying is kind of supervillains. And the whole, like, Demona's never gonna be redeemed or change or be killed. because she's like the Joker of the setting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. That's not going to feel irksome. That's not going to feel like railroady. If like, nope, Demona's Demona.
Yeah.
And then she's immortal. And that's even in the Gargoyles the second she's immortal. And Demona, as even just a canon character, is baby's first Darklord.
Oh my gosh, yes. As mentioned, me and my brother's first Darklord.
Yes.
We made her a Darklord.
That is how perfect this is for the setting. This is like the first thing you thought of when you're like, let's make our own Ravenloft domain. There's big themes to engage with. But it's not like you can engage, like we mentioned, you can engage with things like prejudice, but it's like not super heavy, and you have a bit more of a narrative distance than with a lot of other, like, you know, Peter, Lord help us Neverland.
Oh gosh, or even like Hunchback.
Yeah, exactly. Lord help us Hunchback.
Yeah.
Lord help the outcast. Like, there isn't a real-world analogy to Gargoyles.
Like, there's a little bit of colonialism stuff, but not even that much.
Like, you can explore themes of prejudice, but it's not like the movie Bright, where orcs were just black people. Like, so you get that kind of distance to maybe make people a little more comfortable with exploring those themes. And just the session-to-session, episode-to-episode story with this overall meta plot is one of the best, like, models of pacing.
So good.
A D&D campaign.
So good.
Like, just, wow. I mean, I remember, once, if you're a hashtag 90s kid, you probably remember the idea of, like, I didn't know cartoons could be like this. I didn't know cartoons could tell a story like this.
Like, you younger listeners.
Yeah, you don't even know.
With your Gravity Falls.
Your Stevens universes.
Just, I remember, like, it was so mind-blowing. Just one little callback to a previous episode. I don't think there's ever an episode other than in the World Tour where they don't refer to something that happened previously, even in a little way.
Or like there's an episode we've referenced a couple times, Elisa gets shot. And
oh yeah.
And then for like the next 4 episodes, she's on crutches. Like, cause she's healing. Like, and that's amazing.
Yeah.
And once again, if you were watching cartoons in the 80s and 90s, this was like, they'd invented a new genre of cartoon, which is the serialized story. Yeah,
we were coming off of, like, G.I. Joe and, like, G1 Transformers, which are great in their own way, but not like this.
So, a lot of strengths, like front-loading there. We're both very, as you can probably tell from the episode, very positive about this idea. But there are some challenges. Rachel, what might those challenges be?
The Manhattan Clan are the protagonists.
Yes.
Like, 100%. No questions asked. And you can get around this somewhat by not having them that much in your game, or by having, if some of your players want to play the Manhattan Clan, that could help. But, like, it's built around them. They're the ones who have this connection to Demona. And if the PCs aren't Gargoyles, then that means that the biggest, juiciest connection to the Dark Lord isn't going to be something that they're involved in. Especially, like, having Demona as the Dark Lord rather than Xanatos. Part of why we did that is because she's there from the beginning, and everything that happens in the show is her fault. But that's kind of a double-edged sword, because, she was there from the beginning. Goliath was there from the beginning. Your Fire Genasi sorcerer was not there from the beginning. So it's a challenge. The obvious PC analog would be Elisa, but she's, like, super plugged into the setting, and she brings a lot to the table for the Gargoyles that a group of wandering transients can't. So it's kind of tricky to emulate the feeling of Gargoyles in a game if you're coming in with outsiders, if you're not just playing a Wyvern set campaign.
I was trying to think, as we do sometimes with planning these, is there like a PC analog? Is there like a story where I can point to someone and be like, oh, these are like the PCs? And one of the things that's coming into my mind is, I don't remember the episode name, but it's the one where Bluestone learns about the Gargoyles and the Illuminati and all.
Yeah.
And because you have, like, oh, here is this guy, and he's got his thing, and he's kind of got like PC energy, and he just is like, discovers this world. And he's like pulled into this wider story. But even that is, Bluestone isn't a random wandering, like, heavily armed transient. He's this character that is part of Castle Wyvern, the city, and has all these pre-existing connections that have been building episode.
Yeah. And we never were like some random Gargoyles. Yeah. And, like, maybe you could set it at a point where the Manhattan Clan isn't awake yet or whatever, so they're decentered, but, like, are your players going to want that? Like, if you're not playing for a bunch of hashtag 90s kids, then maybe. But, like, if you're playing for a bunch of, people in their mid-40s, and you see it's a Gargoyles game, they're going to want to hang out with Goliath.
Yeah.
And then if you are having gargoyle PCs, the fact that they turn to stone during the day is going to be a challenge. And that can give, like, some structure to your campaign, and that can actually be helpful, like, especially if we've got this idea of Demona being human during the day. If everybody in your group is a non-gargoyle, that could be a good, like, no, you're handling all this daytime stuff, and maybe even, like, Demona's being more active during the day because she knows that's when the Manhattan Clan's asleep. But that is a challenge. We've
talked a couple times, we've mentioned that we're sort of imagining this is Oops All Elisis. And if it's Oops All Elisis, it's fine. Then it's like you have your big action scenes with the gargoyles in night, and then in day you run around doing your, like, investigation, and you're this, and you're that, and that kind of gives a nice rhythm to the campaign.
Yeah.
And if you are having a gargoyle PC, though, which once again, I imagine there's a very good chance you have this gargoyles loving 90s kids. They're like, no, I don't want to be a dumb human. I want to be stone by day and warrior by night. And that's, if you're all gargoyles, if you're just doing the Manhattan Clan, you're also fine.
Yeah.
That is fine. But it's that mixed party that's going to be tricky.
Yeah. We're going to talk in a minute about World of Darkness, but this is actually a thing we're using World of Darkness might be a good model, because if you run a kitchen sink World of Darkness game, and you've got 2 changelings, a mage, and a vampire.
Yeah.
You've got the same problem with your vampire.
And really, it would probably have to be something, because, like, in theory, you could just do your Elisa goes and runs around, does all the daytime stuff, but really, like, that session's going to be really unfun for the gargoyle player.
Gosh, yeah.
If they're like, okay, I have been sitting here being a statue while you've been, like, role-playing these scenes for 2 hours.
Roll to not get pooped on by a pigeon.
Yeah. No, you can't, because you can't do anything.
You're right.
You have no control over that.
Over pigeon poop.
You don't get a dex save on that. You're a statue. Just, I guess, roll above a 10, and it's luck, pure luck.
Yeah.
But it would have to be something like you turn to stone. Maybe there's a very short scene with the Elisa character, and then they do, like, a downtime activity.
Yeah.
Like, make 1 or 2 rolls to be sort of, this is what Elisa does during the day. And that's kind of hemming in the Elisa player then. Be like, no, I'm not going to, like, roleplay multiple scenes of you running around doing stuff.
Because we know that we've all seen Awakening, because that was on our watch list. You're not going to get for your Elisa player an episode like, I think it was Awakening Part 4, where she's running around and distracting the goons during the day while Goliath is stoned.
Yeah.
And that was really her spotlight moment, and that's taking something away from your Elisa player. She doesn't get to do that. So
that is a challenge to consider.
Yes. As we kind of touched on when we were talking about the Children of Oberon, it has its own very complex mythology, and that mythology doesn't always mesh with D&D. So you're gonna have to pick one mythology or the other, and some of your players might not be happy with what you choose. So just like basic example, if you're Fae are the Children of Oberon, they're not going to be D&D Fae and vice versa. So, or
even in the Gargoyles universe, basically every supernatural creature that isn't a gargoyle is a child of Oberon.
Yeah.
So I remember in the really abysmal Ireland one, the whole, like, the Banshee was a child of Oberon.
Or like Odin is a child of Oberon.
Yeah, Odin's a child of Oberon. And you're like, not in Dungeons and Dragons, they're not. But, so that's going to be a thing.
Yeah. And it's much more suited to something like World of Darkness than D&D. Like, it's a very secret world of magic that most people don't know about kind of thing. And if you're running a low magic, mostly human game, like things were in 2nd and 3rd edition, you're still probably going to be pretty okay. But, like, if it's this very high magic game, and you've got, like, maybe 1 human in your party, and everybody else is, like, a Goliath, and a Hadazi, and a Harangon, then it's like, why does anyone care about
yeah.
This is a rabbit person.
We've touched on this multiple points, that fundamentally it's a really core part of the setting. The gargoyles are scary and strange and alien. And that would not be the case in your average Dungeons & Dragons world.
Yeah.
It would just be like, oh, we've got a million weird dudes with their weird stuff, and these are weird dudes with wings that turn into stone in the day, and that is not, like, a monocle popper. That is not, like, outside of the realm of possibility.
I guess if you're going by, like, Marvel logic, where it's like, okay, Reed Richards is great, but Wolverine, we can't fear him.
Because he got his powers from a science accident.
That's totally fine.
That's cool. So before we rejoin our narrator and find out where she's going next, a quick note about how you can follow along in this journey ahead of us with our small screen summer. And wish we'd thought of this for the previous one, but it's a new adventure for us. Much like for Dee, it's a new adventure for us. So we're going to have the end of her thing where she's going to talk about where she's going next. And then after the credits, we're going to have a list of episodes to watch.
Yeah.
So find out what the show is that we're doing for our next one. And if you've not seen that show, then you can listen to that episode list and then go and watch those and basically have what you need for everything we're going to be talking about in the next episode.
Yes.
But before any of that, if they decided there was another genre of horror that we didn't even think to mention that they thought could
you figured out how to do folk horror and Gargoyles,
then how could they contact us?
Well, you can email us at wonderfulworldofdarklords@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook or Tumblr or Patreon at Wonderful World of Dark Lords. And you can find us on YouTube, just Wonderful World of Dark Lord. And I think YouTube is where we're the most hopping right now. But you can find us in any of those places.
If you like how we adapted this amazing D&D-able show into specifically D&D campaign framework, I have a couple of adventures where I've adapted horror movies into D&D adventures. If you go to the free domain right up on DM's Guild, there's a link in the show notes. Then just look for more by this author. Look for Tom Kohler on DM's Guild. You can find them. If you like our consideration for younger players, then we also have a couple of things about running more horror spooky themed games for younger players.
And speaking of spooky things for younger people, I have a picture book, Mother Ghost, Nursery Rhymes for Little Monsters. It's exactly what it sounds like. And I also have several short stories for adults on my website, www.rachelkohler.com. I don't think that any of them are specifically Gargoyles related, but Gargoyles was such a big influence on my imagination that you might see its little clawed fingerprints
deep in the roots of your development as a writer.
It is, yes.
Until next time, thank you for listening, and happy gaming.
Parting thoughts. It is clear that Demona and Xanatos have some sort of alliance. I do not know if they consider themselves equal partners, or if he has somehow harnessed her the way that King Haggard harnessed the Red Bull. As both she and the castle have a centuries-old connection to the land, I can only imagine their mystical potency. I suspect it will end in treachery and slaughter, for these seem to be the favorite currency of both parties. Given the domain's history, Demona is likely to survive it. I wonder whether the same is true of Xanatos. I have begun my research into the next domain on my itinerary. I did not expect to recognize anything at all, for it is barely featured on any maps and has little impact on other domains beyond its copious lumber exports, hardly the sort of realm to have a presence outside its own borders. However, as I studied a book about its arcane history, a glyph caught my eye. A circle of symbols with a triangle at its center. I had seen this glyph before, on one of the murals in Atlantis. Scrawled beneath it in the Atlantean tongue had been the words, "Do not summon at all costs." Regards, D.
My little scholar is correct in that the majority of gargoyles are elemental creatures, with intelligence akin to a wild beast, or perhaps a certain mercenary with an inclination toward falconry. Gargoyles can also be created by a wizard or priest who utilizes them as stalwart guardians. Regardless of their origin, gargoyles share a common trait: the need to defend something, usually a place, particular object, or even a lineage. It is their nature. Which begs the question, what does this Demona defend when, by all accounts, she has nothing left of her past but herself? Something tells me she would not demean herself by defending Xanatos' purchased castle, nor the relics he hoards within. A pity you were unable to examine his private collection. Confirmation of the whereabouts of the Phoenix Gate and the Grimorum Arcanorum would have been beneficial to our endeavors. No matter. If what we seek was there, Thanos would have stolen it along with the Eye of Odin.
This has been The Wonderful World of Darklords. We have no affiliation with Disney or Wizards of the Coast. All music recordings used in this episode are in the public domain and were obtained through museopen.org. Titles and links are in the show notes. Dialogue for Yensid was written by Aslan Rex himself, who you can follow on Tumblr at Darklord Aslan. The Wonderful World of Darklords logo was designed by Haylight Jones. You can find links to their work in the show notes. If you'd like to support the show, look for us on patreon.com or find our tip jar on Red Circle. Thanks for listening. Hello, dear listeners. So yes, our July episode is going to be Gravity Falls. If you've seen Gravity Falls, awesome. If you have not seen Gravity Falls, then here is our watch list. If you have no familiarity with it at all, then go ahead and watch Tourist Trapped, the premiere, just to let you know who the characters are and the setting and everything. And then in the show itself, in Season 1, we're going to be discussing Irrational Treasure and Dreamscaperers. And then in Season 2, we'll be discussing Into the Bunker, Sock Opera, Society of the Blind Eye, Northwest Mansion Mystery, Not What He Seems, A Tale of Two Stands, and The Last Mabelcorn. If you do have time to watch Weirdmageddon, then there is a lot of stuff with our Dark Lord in Weirdmageddon, but it also is kind of like, this is the Dark Lord's goal, this is what he's aiming for, it's not like a thing that's currently happening in the canon of our setting. So if you're not able to get Weirdmageddon in, or if you haven't seen Gravity Falls and you start watching it and you're like, this is really cool, I want to watch the whole thing before watching the finale, then it's not essential, you'll be okay. Thank you so much for listening, and happy gaming.